The Newsroom, hello and welcome once again from Johannesburg here in South Africa. I know, of course, you have an answer. The show is always live, broadcast from our studios right here in Auckland Park between 9 and 12 every weekday morning. We're also live on YouTube. You can watch us on demand there. Also, well, anytime really, at anywhere in the world. Here's the question of the day. Of course, it's International Women's Day today. Around the world, not just in South Africa, we're asking women, are women doing enough to empower themselves? Tough question, but that's what we've got for you today at SABC Newsroom. That's where you interact with us on this International Women's Day. And most of our show will be dedicated early doors to that. But let's go get the news now from Elvis.
President Jacob Zuma arrived in Abuja, Nigeria last night for a two-day state visit. The Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan has arrived in London on the first leg of an international roadshow. And we have an exclusive interview with the head of UN Women, Dr. Mzile Mlambo-Ngcuka, since today is International Women's Day as we celebrate our women worldwide. Now, those are all your headlines, but before we get to the news, let's find out from Kendall Makamate what's happening on the sports front. A very good morning to you.
Elvis, good morning to you, and good morning to you at home as well. Here's a sneak peek of what we've got for you in the sports today.
I made a huge mistake, and I've let my fans down. I've let the sport down.
Twitter reacts to Sharapova's shock admission that she used a banned substance.
I'm very confident that we will have a clean tournament.
And the ICC reveals that it has acted to avert potential spot fixing and is investigating the Hong Kong syndicate. All this while in the UEFA Champions League, Roma with a mountain to climb as they travel to the Bernabeu with a 2-goal deficit. That, in a nutshell, is what we've got for you in the sports on about 10:20 or so. Back to you, Elvis.
Thank you, Kendall. Our top story this morning. President Jacob Zuma arrived in Abuja in Nigeria last night for a two-day state visit. The leaders of the continent's economic powerhouses will meet this morning and are expected to discuss the strengthening of economic and political ties. President Zuma is the first African head of state to visit President Muhammadu Buhari since his inauguration in May last year. Now, on the table are 34 agreements. They include trade, investment, agriculture and energy. Although not on the agenda, they are likely to discuss the 80 billion rand fine imposed on MTN by Nigeria's telecoms regulator. President Zuma will be given the honor of addressing Nigeria's parliament. Meanwhile, the Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan has arrived in London on the first leg of an international roadshow. The minister and a team of Treasury officials will interact with investors in a bid to convince them that South Africa can emerge from its economic woes and avoid a downgrade. They'll also visit Boston and New York later this week.
As a country, I don't think we want to get into junk status. Nor does the corporate sector want to be in junk status, nor do workers want their companies to be in junk status, nor do South African citizens who are going to face higher inflation, higher costs, higher prices for imported commodities or goods want to be in a country where we find ourselves in that position. And that's why we have the sense of urgency from all of us to work together to sell one South African story and to get people to believe in our story.
Back home, the Tshwane University of Technology Management has closed down the Soshanguve campuses. Students have until this afternoon to evacuate residences. The university says it shut down the north and south campuses outside Pretoria because of violence, intimidation and assaults on students and staff. It says the disruption of lectures also led to the decision. The campuses will reopen on the 5th of next month, with only registered students allowed onto the premises. The SRC says it's opposed to the decision and will take legal action. The fruit industry in the Western Cape is predicting losses of more than 700 million rand in revenue should the drought persist. Most of the country is in the grip of the worst drought in more than a century.
Witzenberg Valley, rich in deciduous fruit and winter rain. But current drought conditions are of concern to farmers in the area. Many, like Khaled Toy, are praying for excessive rain to fall.
We hoped for good rainfall every now and then, but there wasn't really much. So a lot of the orchards haven't been irrigated optimal, and we can see the effect of that in the fruit size. Some of the orchards, there's up to 50% of the fruit on the trees that will not make export standard or packing standard, that will go to juice.
The lack of rainfall is starting to take its toll, forcing food producers to spend more. This may lead to negative effects on consumers' pockets.
In terms of prices, you could probably expect a slight increase in prices. We are a global player, so we compete with other Southern Hemisphere countries for the Northern Hemisphere markets on exports specifically. So the less fruit there are from the Southern Hemisphere, you can expect that the prices will increase.
To date, government has allocated just under R1 billion for drought relief. Carmel Lochenberg-Roberts, SABC News, series.
Now, it's International Women's Day today, and we're celebrating you, the women of our country, as well as around the globe. And it's over now to Eben to tell us more.
Yeah, thank you very much, Elvis. Got some interesting interviews and some interesting reports from around the world that deals with women's issues, but also the successes in some spheres. Of course, today we've got an interview from the United Nations. The head of UN Women has lauded South Africa's strong legislation to protect and empower women, but lamented its weak implementation. Ahead of International Women's Day, Dr. Phumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka called for countries to shift from a business-as-usual approach so that Goal 5 of the SDGs on gender equality and women's empowerment can be achieved by the 2030 deadline. She also weighed in on the importance of the race for the next Secretary General of the United Nations and the presidency of the United States.
I want the world to know that it is not business as usual, that there's a date, 2030, by which we need to have made significant changes in the lives of women and girls. We're looking for substantive change and we're looking for lasting change. So we have to choose the interventions that we're going to focus on between now and 2030 so that there are significant building blocks for gender equality.
Some 90 governments have answered UN Women's call to step it up for gender equality. What about the other 100 that we have here as UN member states?
The other 100 are quite a large number of countries that are in conflict. It is also a large number of countries that have such complex challenges that unfortunately, they do not recognize that gender equality is part of the solution and therefore would have prioritized other issues rather than gender equality. So, yes, it's a combination of just states that don't function well and those that think that gender equality is not a top priority for them. So we have to convince them that gender equality is a solution, not an additional problem to them. I always say the glass is half filled, in the sense that there is tangible change. We have less maternal deaths, we have less infant deaths, we have more girls at school, we have more girls and women assuming leadership, but not enough. But also more than anything else, we know what works. We have got evidence. We are beginning to collect data, not yet perfect, but enough to point us in a direction. But what we really lack is proper implementation of the good legislation that we have passed. Because one thing that has happened, especially in the last 20 years, is that countries passed very good legislation addressing equality, addressing violence against women, all of it as a result of the lobbying and the hard work of women. But the implementation remains patchy, and the funding and the investment that is required for the implementation to be effective also is worrisome. So I would like that we focus on better implementation, zero tolerance for underperformance, and better investment in initiatives that support women.
We have two very interesting developments in 2016 in this part of the world. The search for the next Secretary General, whom many feel should be a woman, and of course we have the very real possibility of seeing a woman elected to the United States presidency. What would it mean, and what would it say to the world if women were elected to both these positions?
Game changer. To have a woman as a Secretary General of the UN would mean that we are serious about leaving no one behind, because there has never been a women Secretary General, not because there aren't good women who would qualify for that job, who would do a good job. So by affirming a woman of substance who qualifies for that job, we would send a very strong message for everyone in the world and every institution in the world that tends not to look at women's talent and take it seriously, that it is time now to do so. If you have a woman in the United States of America, again, the same message will be sent. So both ways, this would be exceptionally good news for the world, not just for women and girls, because these changes would empower both men and women. The fact that we have to have an anecdote when we are talking about women, it's always like there's an assumption that it's harder to find a good woman. And the women who will come forward, who will be supported, would have gone through some scrutiny, just like men would, in order for them to be in the slate that is respectable. So I do not have any worries that we would struggle to find a good woman. I am worried about the fact that we may not all be ready for this, and therefore we need to continue to encourage everybody who has to make that decision that this is time. Women are ready, and I know lots of men are ready, and the world needs it.
Your vision of Planet 50/50 by 2030, as you look down the track to 2030, what needs to get out of your way so that you can reach the finish line?
Legislation that still discriminates against women. We still have about 128 countries that have legislation that discriminate against women. So that is one of our focus areas, one of the building blocks to 2030. We need to make sure that we rebuild the women's movement so that we can take full advantage of the universality of this agenda. For instance, when we are fighting violence against women, every country has got that problem. So we need to make sure that we have this united front in every country. When we talk about unequal pay, which is one very concrete development that we need to pay attention to, that is a problem in every country. When we talk about gender parity and the representation of women in leadership-making bodies in every country, this is a problem. So these are the things that should get off our way. And then, of course, we've got some regional specific challenges that are nevertheless very important and concern the whole world, like child marriages. We need that to get out of the way, because these are millions and millions of girls whose lives and future get lost.
What's been the most important thing that you've learned since taking the reins here at UN Women?
The importance of broadening the constituency that fights for gender equality. From where I'm sitting, the constituency is still very small. I use apartheid as an example all the time. Apartheid was not just fought by those who were oppressed. It was forced by those who were on the side of the oppressed, who came from the community of the oppressors. It was fought by the whole world, by sports people, by artists, by private sector, by churches and so on. We need a movement that is much more stronger than we have today, and it must be in every sphere of life, and people do not have to look at one organization such as the UN Women. They must do what needs to be done wherever they are, understanding the context that they're in and what is the best thing that they can do where they are to bring down patriarchy.
Now, International Women's Day coincides with a couple of key primaries in the United States presidential nominating contests. Hillary Clinton is marching towards what would be an historic campaign. She's making a second run for the White House, and it looks like she'll win the Democratic nomination and compete against the man the Republican Party nominates.
Helping to build a strong future.
The United States could be on the verge of an historic appointment.
I'm running for president to break down every barrier that stands in the way of America fulfilling its potential.
But before Hillary Clinton can become the first female commander-in-chief, she needs to secure the Democratic nomination and win November's election.
I think it would be historic. I think there are ways in which it would do for women, for young women in particular, what Barack Obama's candidate presidency has done for young African Americans.
The former First Lady, who lost out to Mr. Obama in the 2008 race, won't want to miss her chance to make history this time round.
And she does have to work a lot harder to be the first woman in the White House. That I feel like Hillary can be the one to put us where we need to be.
America has already broken uncharted territory by electing an African American president. Now, according to a new CNN ORC poll, 80% of voters are ready to see a woman in the Oval Office. If Mrs. Clinton can beat her rival Bernie Sanders to the party nomination, only the Republican candidate can stop the former Secretary of State breaking the ultimate glass ceiling. Kevin McAleese, SABC News, Washington.
Now, events are taking place around the world to mark International Women's Day today. In London, the University of East London has held a series of talks and workshops surrounding the political, economic, social and cultural advancements on women in the United Kingdom. Our correspondent Dan Whitehead filed this report.
Pledge for parity. The message of International Women's Day is being heard here at One London University. Discussions and talks are being held at the Elevate Her conference to mark the 105th anniversary of International Women's Day.
It's not a minority issue. Women are not a world minority, so it's absolutely crucial that we have events like this that help to support the role of women, that help to support development ideas for women, because although it's not a minority issue, women are in a minority in jobs of importance, representation on boards, starting up companies, etc.
To tackle those issues, careers advice and tips from women entrepreneurs are also on offer. Events are taking place across the UK to mark International Women's Day, and here at the University of East London, the topics are varied.
Women are not homogenous. We have different stories and different points of entries into development. So within this particular conference, we showcased or highlighted some of the voices from women from working class, which is very much reflective of a lot of the women that attend this university, but also women that are in professional positions that wish to climb the career ladder.
Last year, the World Economic Forum predicted it would take until 2133 to close the gender gap. Events like this across the UK today want to ensure that that happens far sooner. Dan Whitehead, SABC News, London.
Now, the woman as one of the leading candidates for the presidency in the United States, one might think that it's a good time to be a professional woman in America. But the United States lags behind other advanced economies when it comes to female-friendly workplace policies, with no nationally mandated paid maternity leave and no national government-subsidized childcare program. Our correspondent Mary McCarthy reports from Denver on the challenges American women face on the job, especially when they choose to have children.
It's a busy Sunday dinner, but precious time together in the Piger home.
Raise your hands for cake. The hardest thing is finding balance.
Virginia and her husband both work full-time while raising 3 kids.
You spend X number of hours in the car commuting. You spend X number of hours taking care of your kids. There's no time to sleep anymore. Oh, yeah.
With a high-level sales position in a major corporation, Virginia says she was granted some time off after each birth.
You get 6 weeks of paid leave. You have the choice to have another 6 weeks of unpaid leave.
Just a month and a half of paid time off. Those are maternity leave benefits that pale in comparison to those of other wealthy nations. And yet Virginia considers herself lucky, since the vast majority of American women don't get any paid leave after having a baby.
That results in this really precarious situation where at a time that should be joyous for a family welcoming a new child into the family, instead mothers and fathers are completely stressed by their financial responsibilities and care responsibilities.
Linda Merrick runs 9 to 5, a nationwide organization that fights for better workplace policies for women.
Childcare can be one of the, if not the most expensive cost that they have.
Whitney Herder is a physician's assistant who says she's been shocked by the cost of care for her first child.
We're probably like dead middle class. And it's been a struggle for us financially.
Whitney took 3 months of unpaid leave when she had baby Arlo 15 months ago, but is frustrated she couldn't take more.
You want to be a mom first, but society doesn't really support you in being that.
The staggering cost of childcare leads many American families to choose for one parent to stay at home. And more often than not, it's the mother who drops out of the workforce, putting her career on hold temporarily and often permanently. Mary McCarthy, SABC News, Denver.
Now, if you've just joined us today, the world celebrates International Women's Day under the theme Pledge for Parity. That's a hashtag, actually. And this year's campaign is designed to motivate individuals and organizations to take concrete action to propel gender equality in a variety of areas around the world. Various comments coming in on International Women's Day. Let's take a look at some of the sentiments being expressed here this morning. Now, this one comes from Desi. It says, let International Women's Day be a reminder that our women be protected and not a single daughter is left behind. Asiya says, every day remind yourself that you are the best, you're the precious, you can make the difference. We are the women. Hashtag International Women's Day. Balbir Yadav says, we must take an oath for respecting women on this occasion. I took it's your turn. International Women's Day. Then Anna Maya Hendrickson says, together we can do a lot to make life better for the women and the girls in our global world. Let's do it. Hashtag International Women's Day. Of course, we're asking you a question today with regard to International Women's Day. There it is on screen right now, and it says, are women doing enough to empower themselves? Ultimately, the fight to uplift yourself begins inside. Let's take a look now at what is happening around the courts in the country. That's in South Africa. Also here in Durban, United States. Hip-hop artist Yasin Bey, probably known as Mos Def, is expected to appear in the Bellville Magistrates Court. Now, that's in Cape Town. In the Bellville Magistrates Court for contravening South Africa's immigration laws. Yes, he attempted to leave Cape Town with an unrecognized world passport. Then, still in Cape Town, the Zephany Nurse trial is set to continue in the Western Cape High Court. The defense is expected to call on 2 more witnesses a little bit later today to continue their testimony. Time for us to take a short break. When we come back, well, we look at the issues that women face here in South Africa. Don't go away.
SABC News. We report, contextualize and present news and current affairs honestly, fairly and fully. We consider it a duty to provide consistent, relevant, useful and top quality information and analysis. Our mission is to provide credible, accurate and interesting news programming, bringing news into everyone's homes in everyone's languages. Thank you, South Africa, for relying on SABC News for quality news output and for making us your #1 source of information. SABC News, Africa's news leader.
News Today takes an in-depth look on news locally, continentally and globally. We bring the world to your home. We cover all economy news extensively to keep you informed. We are live to break news as and when they happen across the world. We analyze news using experts in all aspects. Make a date with News Today every Monday to Friday from 3 to 5:30 p.m.
Welcome back with Newsroom here on SABC News. Now, all over the world, women continue to contribute to social, economic, cultural and political achievement. However, violence against women continues to rise, regardless of thousands of campaigns put together to raise awareness. Now, joining us in studio to talk about violence in women in particular is Nonhlanhla Mokoena. She's the Executive Director at an NGO called Power, or People Opposing Women Abuse. Very good morning to you, my dear. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning, and thanks for inviting me.
It's International Women's Day. Let's start at the beginning. What should a day like this mean to an organization like yourselves, but also then to the wider world, especially South Africa?
A day like this should be a day where we celebrate the resilience of women who have gone through challenges and overcome them. But I think in a country like ours, like South Africa, we are not celebrating as we encourage women to speak out whenever they are abused by their partners. 1 in 4 women are in an abusive relationship. A woman is killed every 8 hours in South Africa, so we have nothing to celebrate. Actually, we should continue with the struggle and educate women and educate young girls that abuse, it's not love. Abuse is someone trying to oppress you forever.
How do we get these numbers to come down? Because we've got all these campaigns that continually run around South Africa. We heavily invested as a nation in 16 days and a whole host of other campaigns, but the levels of abuse and violence, they're not coming down.
Yes. I think we have invested a lot in terms of raising awareness, but not in programs that will address the problem at the root. We need to start educating young girls and boys and raising them as equals. So the socialization of our girl and our boy children has to change. Equality means that a boy child feels that, I'm a boy and I can respect a girl, and a girl child is just like me. And also equality means that a girl child feels that, I'm a girl child, but also for me, the world is out there for me to experience and to do whatever that I can. So as parents, we should begin to educate our children from at home. But again, we also need parenting programs. We have mainly focused on saying, yes, abuse is wrong, but we have not really invested in parenting programs and children's programs that will address this issue from the root.
Now, today specifically, we asked all the women on our team to come up with a question on International Women's Day. They were at pains to come up with a question. Eventually, they came up with a question of the day that we can flick up on the screen if we have time. And I want you to maybe answer this question. It's a question by the women to the women. And the question is, are you as a woman doing enough to empower yourself? The premise of it, them saying that women are often happy to just take a back seat and just ride along and not rock the boat. How do you respond? How do you respond to that?
I say it's not always true that we are taking the back seat. We are dealing with a whole lot of other issues. It's not only violence against women. but it's also resistance from our family members, it's also resistance from society, it's also resistance from our religion and including our culture. But as women, if we stand together and encourage each other and not put each other down, we will overcome this. But then again, we can't do this as women on our own. We still need our society to rally with us to end violence against women, to end violence against the girl child.
Now, we saw a little bit earlier the UN head of women, Phumzile Mlambo Ngcuka, she said that South Africa, we have the best policies in the world, we have a wonderful constitution, but we're not implementing these wonderful laws and we're not living them. We don't espouse them here in South Africa. How do we overcome that, do you think?
I think as women we need to educate ourselves on the laws that are supposed to be protecting us, and we need to go to the institutions that are preventing us from accessing these laws and make sure we advocate for their implementation. I think that's a huge campaign that we need to take on as South African women and as South African men to make sure that we end violence against women in our country.
You mentioned the boy child and the girl child. What about the man? What about us? What is the role that you would like us to see play in South Africa going forward? What's the responsibility that men have in this space?
I always say we call on the good men in South Africa who are not abusers to always speak out, to always educate other men about abuse and its consequences. I think what we are finding is that not all men are abusers, but the good ones are always keeping quiet. They are not speaking out whenever abuse is happening in our country. So we call on them to also take a stand and say, you are not going to abuse in my name as a man. I'm going to speak out against abuse against women and children. So we need those good men to always speak out.
As a nation, South Africa, are you happy or are you concerned that we're making progress or not making progress in dealing with women abuse?
I am concerned because whenever we make good strides in terms of ending violence against women, we end up being set back by things that are happening in the country. For instance, the Maiden's Bursary, things like that take us back to say, what are we doing? We have a constitution and a very good one. But where is equality when we are saying you need to be tested for virginity in order for you to access, your bursary?
The concerning issue around the Maiden's Bursary was that it was proposed by a woman.
A woman, but also a government official who's supposed to uphold the constitution of this country. It doesn't matter whether it's a woman. There are women who are going to police station to access police services, and other women prevent them from accessing those services. The issue here is about upholding the constitution of this country and respecting the laws of this country. And as service providers, we must do what we are hired to do. I'm a police woman. I am not a counselor. I am not a psychologist. I am a mayor. I am not a child education specialist. I am a mayor. I should be running a town. I should not be concerned in terms of how children access bursaries.
How do we find a balance between all these pillars of our society, religion, culture, the law, and then, of course, education and all the expectations? How do we balance that in this space?
I think our constitution is the highest law of the land, and it must come first. And anything that is inconsistent with the constitution, it's not constitutional, and it should not be respected in our country.
You speak to abused women daily. If there's one thing that they tell you that they would want to happen, what would that be?
Is to see justice. Is whenever they go to a court and say, I'm here to apply for a protection order because my husband or my boyfriend is abusing me, they would want the person who's assisting them not to become a counselor or a psychologist, to just do their job. Or if they go to a police station and say, I want to lay a charge, they must not be turned back or informed that, what's going to happen when we arrest your husband. So that is the justice that women want to see. We are happy that recently with the cases of femicide, we are seeing the justice system sending a message out there that it's not okay to kill your partner. So we are encouraging the justice system to continue to restore women's trust in the justice system.
Nonhlanhla, thank you for joining us today. It's very sobering views you bring here this morning. Thank you very much. That's Nonhlanhla Mokoena. She's the Executive Director at an NGO. The NGO is called Power, P-O-W-A, People Opposing Women Abuse. Yes, it's a scourge that continues to be a problem, not just in South Africa, but throughout the wider world. We continue with our focus on International Women's Day today. Of course, we ask a question with regards to that. The question is, are women doing enough to empower themselves? Ultimately, the process has to start within yourself. Now we're going to focus on a very special woman. She couldn't read or write until she was 14 years old, but she has gone on to earn a master's degree in public health, working in several countries on the African continent and beyond. While she worked with the United Nations in Somalia, she realized that a country was in need of proper leadership. Sarah Kimani sat down with 42-year-old Somalifin Faduma Dayib, who has announced that she will run for the Somali presidency later this year. A win would make her Somalia's first female president and also the first female head of state from the East African region.
Like many Somalis her age, Faduma spent her childhood running away from the country's civil war.
I was born in Kenya and deported from this country in 1989 along with my family. Ended up in Somalia as a refugee when the war broke out. I left in 1990 with two of my younger siblings to go to Finland.
It is while in Finland that she built her dream and harbored a desire to return home to war-torn Somalia. Faduma is running to be her country's president. Hers is an uphill task, having to convince the population that she has what it takes to lift Somalia from years of conflict, starvation, youth unemployment and despair. That she is a woman is, according to her, an advantage and the reason voters should consider her.
We've had situations whereby women have negotiated their existence. For example, can I be an MP? You know, really a lower level of or echelons of the government, and they haven't been taken very seriously. And when I'm asked why the presidency, my answer is always why not. We never ask that question of male politicians. Why should it only be asked of female politicians? We have every right to run for the highest office in the country, like any other male candidate.
Somalia has not held full elections since 1967. The current president, Hassan Sheikh Mahmoud, was elected in 2012, voted in by members of parliament only. The security situation then could not provide for nationwide polls. This year's elections may not be different. That may be an obstacle to a free and fair poll, according to Faduma, but nothing to stop her.
In terms of leadership, I bring competency, I bring skills, I bring compassion, I bring servant leadership, I bring a new way of doing things, I bring a new dawn to Somalia, I bring hope to Somalia.
The response in Somalia has been mixed. Faduma has received death threats. She has also received backing of many young Somalis tired of clan politics. The mother of four, currently pursuing her PhD, hopes to inspire many more women in Africa to take up leadership positions.
My message is really a Pan-Africanist one. We want to formalize the role African women play in the continent, on the continent, and say that we will no longer negotiate our existence. We are here to take our rightful place. We will formalize this leadership, and we will push the continent forward.
Should she win, Faduma says she will prioritize peace and reconciliation, security and economic development. Sarah Kimani, SABC News, Kenya.
It's International Women's Day. We have asked a question today about, well, are women doing enough to empower themselves? There's been lots of comments coming in with regards to this. Some feel it's a little bit tough, the question that we're asking. But let's have a look at 2 or 3 tweets to have a look. Zeus, this one from Giuseppe Bacci. He says, at SABC Newsroom, we have to have constant dialogue on how to break a patriarchal system that subjects women to sex objects and inferiority. That is close to the bone. Very nice tweet there from Zeus. We got another one from Zeus. He says, a number of them have, but some still need to believe in their own abilities without measuring themselves against those of men. Sobering thoughts there. Very on point. That one from Zeus. Giuseppe Bacci sending us his view on a question of the day today. Let's go to Newsroom Facebook page now. You can have a look at what our top stories are. They can tell you that attempts to improve relations between South Africa and Nigeria will dominate talks between President Jacob Zuma and his counterpart Muhammadu Buhari. Of course, the president started his visit there yesterday. We'll see the Tshwane University of Technology SRC President Stembiso Shandu says students must refuse to vacate their residences. Finally, the head of the United Nations Women has lauded South Africa's strong legislation to protect and empower women on International Women's Day, but she also lamented its weak implementation. For more on that story and a lot more, you can watch the full interview on our Newsroom Facebook page, or you can go to sabc.co.za/news for all the latest updates. Now, let's take a look at the front pages from around the globe. We'll start in the US of A today with the USA Today. And the newspaper reports that North Korea yesterday again threatened to launch nuclear strikes on the United States and South Korea as the two countries started their annual joint military drills. Then we go to India, where the Hindu reports that family members of a doctor who was killed in a road accident involving Simriti Irani have accused the Human Resource Development Minister of looking away from a dying man and driving off. Then, finally, we go north to the Times in Europe, and it reports that taxpayers will save more than £17 billion if ministers tear up plans for a French-led nuclear power plant and choose a tried and tested alternative. Analysts say that's what their calculations say. Isn't that an argument that's ongoing? The energy argument very much on the table here in South Africa. Nuclear versus alternative energy. So an argument that we'll hear a lot of in the next 10 years. I can guarantee you that. Anyhow, time for us to take a short commercial break. It's International Women's Day. Send us a tweet. What are your thoughts on International Women's Day? And should women do more to empower themselves? After the break.
Children's rights and health are a priority in the journey of good health.
All children should have access to adequate health care, not only curative but preventative as well.
How to identify ADHD on children.
ADHD is a childhood disorder which manifests with the symptoms of hyperactivity, impulsivity, and/or inattention.
Is breastfeeding still a vital nutrition to babies even today?
Breastfeeding for the first 6 months of life is absolutely crucial.
Catch Health Talk with Dr. Sello Mutawun every Saturday from 9 till 10 a.m.
Welcome back. Now today we're asking you that very important question. Is about women empowerment. It's International Women's Day today, and we would like to find out from you, what do you make of Women's Day as a whole, and what should women do? Are women doing enough really to empower themselves? That's the question that we pose to you. You can let us know on the Facebook page as well as on the Twitter handle at SABC Newsroom. Now when a company has more women on its board of directors, it can generate a 36% higher return on equity. Now, this is according to a finding of a survey released by MSCI, a US-based independent provider of insights and tools for institutional investors in December last year. Now, in light of International Women's Day today, Christelle Coleman, the CEO of MUA Insurance Acceptances, states that this research clearly indicates the benefits for companies to have more women in leadership positions. Now, she joins us from our Cape Town studios in Sea Point to discuss this and other related issues. So very good morning to you, Christelle, and welcome.
Good morning, thank you.
First and foremost, let's talk about the challenges that women face in the workplace and take us through that.
I think first and foremost, I would like to start with a positive statistic. We've heard so many stories this morning, and if we look at the international representation of female leadership, even including the Scandinavian countries, it's 23% average representation. But the BRICS countries, we have a 30% representation. So that's really a good news story to start with. And I just wanted to point that out, that in South Africa, we are actually getting it right. We have many women represented in government and obviously in senior leadership. But there's a lot of challenges that go with it. And what we're finding is that women fall out of the career path during the difficult time of their career, which is normally around the childbearing years. Because it becomes so expensive and so incredibly difficult just to stay on that path. And that takes us back to the question of, why does it happen? And of course, it's too much of a challenge. And I think our workplace environment doesn't always support mothers during that phase of their career. So
there's something missing then within the corporate world. Do you then feel that corporate South Africa is not supporting women enough in the working space?
No, I don't agree with that statement at all. I think it goes back to society. I think it goes back to the roles that we see men and women fulfill in society, and that really it becomes very difficult for women to fulfill all their duties. So motherhood, I've got a very good example of the WhatsApp groups at school. I'm obviously a mother, and there's not, on about 5 WhatsApp groups, there's not one man represented. So I have to look after my children's needs, and there's a lot of duties that go with that. It takes up a lot of time having to do the washing, having to do the work at home, and those duties and roles that we apply to men and women often result in women actually getting to a point where they just go, I have the opportunities, I am very ambitious, but I simply can't get to what is expected of me, so now I rather decide to stop working.
Now, how can women then overcome these gender-based stereotypes that exist within the workplace? Is that a possibility?
I think there are 3 areas that we need to focus on. We have to focus on the workplace. So the employers have got a responsibility to make it easier for women. So things like flexi time and flexi press, allowing women to take their children to the doctor, fetching them from school, especially during the childbearing years, and then they will stay with that organization and become, possibly move on to senior leadership. I also believe that we have a responsibility of men to share the load. So make sure that when you are at home that you share the responsibilities of women in the household to make it easier for women to go after their career goals. And then third, and maybe for me the most important, is this message that Sheryl Sandberg talks about a lot, which is women need to lean in. So women need to support one another during during opportunities in the career environment, but also in their private and personal lives, to make sure that there's that support. So if I'm in a successful position as a woman, I must make sure that I support the cause of female equality in my work environment, and make sure that I work towards a more equal representation of women in the workplace and in leadership teams as well.
Now, the survey that found that business can generate 36% higher return on equity if you have a woman on your board. What does that suggest about women? That you are superwoman?
No. It's interesting because I speak from a place of experience. I'm not a specialist or a professor in gender equality. But from my readings, what I believe is that if you have a board that represents your market that you serve, with other words, if you serve a market which is 50-50 male-female, if your board represents that market, you will probably find that there's a better return on investment. And it's about men and women taking hands and working together. It's not about men being better or women being better. It's about that collective energy that results in us achieving better results. And I think that's my most important message.
Is it perhaps also understanding the target market even better from a motherly perspective?
Absolutely. If you just serve a specific market, a big supermarket chain or a health club chain, you need to understand the needs of your market. I think through the leadership as well. It doesn't make sense to have only a specific gender represented on the leadership team and you serve both genders in your target market. It's just logic sense, I think, that we need to apply, and that results in improved return on investment. And that's been proven through numerous studies internationally. It's not, we don't have to prove that gender equality is good for the economy. That's something that we understand exists. The issue is, how do we address gender inequality, and how do we make sure that women are comfortable in moving to a place where they take up their rightful positions in leadership and on the company boards throughout all countries.
I want to go back to something which you mentioned earlier, and that is the BRICS countries, which has got a 30% of women on is it on boards, or was it in the workplace?
Senior management. It's senior management level, and it's quite interesting. Russia sits at 43%, and they believe that as a result of the political environment and where they actually supported a woman education quite seriously through the communist years. So, but yes, South Africa is sitting at 30%, which is very good.
And why is that, do you think? Is that perhaps something?
Yes, there is a reason for it, according to the specialists. We do, believe it or not, we've got some serious education issues going on in South Africa at the moment. But we don't discriminate between men and women when it comes to allowing bursaries and supporting education and post-matric education. So we find that girls are being taught at school and at university on the same level as boys, and that they're taking up those challenges. Internationally, we're also seeing that for the first time now in recent years, girls are starting to outperform boys in maths, for instance. And it's just because they're getting equal education opportunities, and that filters through, obviously, towards senior management level and board level as well.
That sounds absolutely terrific. But yes. Just finally, Christelle, we are asking our listeners and our viewers a question today in terms of Women's Day today. Are women doing enough to empower themselves? And you talked about support a little bit earlier.
I think women need to do more to empower each other. That would be my answer to that question. We really need to understand that this is a serious discussion that needs to be had. We need to talk about it more often. We need to have the right message to our children. It's not okay for the little boy to sit on the couch when the girl has to take the dishes to the wash basin. We have equal shared responsibilities, and it starts with motherhood and how we bring up our children. So
Christelle,
that would be my word of wisdom for the day.
Christelle, thank you so much for your time and joining us.
It's a pleasure.
That's Christelle Coleman, CEO of MUA Insurance Acceptances. And as you heard, there's an increase of women in top positions in the BRICS countries, 30%. So we are outperforming the rest of the world. But women are still grossly underrepresented in the security industry across the globe. But in Zimbabwe, one woman took on a male-dominated industry and creating one of the most successful companies in the country. In the process, Divine Ndukula not only wrote her name in history, but she has changed the face of Zimbabwe's security industry.
Divine Ndukula is used to breaking glass ceilings. Back in 1999, she decided to start a security business on a kitchen table, but there was one problem. The industry was dominated by white men.
I actually didn't even have the security background. That was one. There was no track record, and obviously being a woman, certainly there was that prejudice that there's no way I'm going to survive in this industry. But obviously, business it's not about the sciences, it's about the passion, about what you believe in, that red-hot burning passion in your guts that will pull you through.
That passion was sparked by a recognition that there was a gap in the market for quality services, but few had the confidence that a woman could start a business in the sector, thrive, let alone survive it.
I started obviously by getting work from people that I knew. It was not easy, just with no track record. There were people that said, okay, you can come and just guard my house, you can just come and guard the block of flats where we live in. And we just ensured that the uniform design, the way we trained people, the culture that we inculcated into the people was just different from the usual culture that was in the industry.
In no time, the company took off, but there was another hurdle to overcome, giving other women opportunities in a field that was not perceived as theirs.
Clients were not interested. They were, in fact, it took even getting the women to convince the women that were coming into the organization. This is why I personally took it upon myself to train them, to have them change their minds in terms of how they perceived this work.
It was a hard sell until one company agreed to take women guards and noticed a reduction in the number of thefts.
And it spread like wildfire. And now we are proud that Securico is the largest employer of women, permanently employed women outside government in Zimbabwe. We employ over 900 women permanent. And for us, that is one of the proudest things that I have achieved in this business.
Women are now dog handlers, unit commanders, gunners and management. The company employs a total of 4,000 people and is expanded into the electronic security division. But one of Ndlukula's proudest achievements, beating 2,000 companies from all over the continent to win the 2011 Africa Award for Entrepreneurship. She's also among the top 100 most influential leaders empowering women, alongside Michelle Obama, Hillary Clinton and Graça Machel. As the company eyes expansion into the region, there's one piece of advice Divine Ndlukula would like to give to women wanting to break their glass ceilings.
Believe in yourself, because if you have that belief, then the capacity comes out of that belief.
Shingai Nyoka, SABC News, Harare, Zimbabwe.
That's absolutely inspirational, isn't it? Beautiful stories from women around the globe. Now, tributes flow in for the American computer scientists who changed the way the world communicates. Ray Tomlinson, the inventor of the email and the man who picked the @ symbol for addresses, died on Saturday, aged 74. Let's take a look at some of your comments. Now, you remember that you can send those comments to @SABC Newsroom. This one from Kailash Gupta says, some of the great inventors are not known to the masses until they are gone. Rest in peace, @email symbol inventor Ray Tomlinson. This one from Rishu Raj Kumar says, rest in peace, Ray Tomlinson. May your soul dwell in peace, the father of the email, founder of Apranet. And this one from Mickey says, Ray Tomlinson, programmer and inventor of the email, has died at age 74. It's hard to imagine where we would be today with that invention. Those are all the comments that we have for you currently. Right now, it's time to take a look at your weather forecast with the weatherman, Philip Hawkins. A very good morning to you.
Very good morning to you. Yeah, well, there's a lot going on in terms of your weather for today. A lot of rainfall all the way throughout South Africa and a lot of Africa as well. And we're going to get into that right now. So let's start off first of all by taking a look at Central Africa's regions. Here we're expecting a lot of cloud cover already affecting the area, and that extends all the way throughout Central Africa and down towards the Southern African regions, even towards South Africa as far south as that. Now, in terms of your rainfall for today, we're going to see that starting off concentrated further towards the eastern interior, moving down towards the central interior of Southern Africa, and not too much rainfall yet over the western regions there of Central Africa, but that changes later into today. We can see that intensifying into some fairly heavy storms in the area, and indeed it is going to begin to recede from that northeastern area of the Central African region of Africa there. Now, in terms of your weather for your city today, Uppington peaks at 31 degrees, Gaborone 28, and Harare sharing that same 28-degree high. Quite a bit of rainfall forecast for the area as well. We're going to move further north and see a lot more rainfall making its way towards the Soka, 30-degree maximums. Kigali 29 now. Dar es Salaam and Mombasa peaking at 33 and 34 degrees respectively. Really not deviating too much day-to-day whatsoever. Addis Ababa is at 24 degrees. Juba today expecting rainfall. Very good news for a dry area there. Is going to receive a fair amount of rainfall as well, and that extends all the way towards Djibouti as well. Tehran peaking at a 17-degree maximum, a fairly mild day for Tehran there. We're also going to see a 24-degree high for Damascus with partly cloudy skies. No rainfall over Damascus, but that changes into Dubai, a 30-degree high rainfall. And for this morning, we were expecting quite a bit of fog. Most of that is said to have died off at the moment, burnt off, and it is beginning to clear up there. Algiers is at 13 degrees. Tunis, just further east, is at 21. So temperature changes taking place fairly rapidly between the two. We're going to see rainfall in those two areas. Rainfall dissipates by the time we reach Rabat. 15-degree maximums without the chance of rain. Now, if you are going to be moving further south towards Las Palmas, also expect a fairly mild day. And we are going to see a cloudy one all the way throughout that area and all the way towards the southern parts of West Africa as well. Quite a lot of rainfall forecast all the way throughout this region. Lagos at 32 degrees was already raining early this morning. In fact, before sunrise we saw that rainfall, and we're expecting it to continue throughout a lot of the day. Interior temperatures of 43 degrees in the Sahel region there, but moving further south we're going to see those coming down to about 36 in Bangui, so cooler than we have seen, but still it is going to be a hot day there and very humid after the rainfall as well. Kinshasa at 33 degrees and Brazzaville sharing the same high. This is where we leave it for now, but if you would like to send us feedback or ask for any questions, any queries, email us whether at sabc.co.za or give us a call 011 714 5077.
As stories are broken around the world, SABC makes sure you do not miss out. As the stories unfold throughout the day, News at 8 updates all newsworthy stories worldwide. Globally, we are there. Locally, we leave no story untold. Make a date with News at 8 every Saturday and Sunday on SABC News, Africa's news leader.
It's 10:00 hours Central Africa time on this Tuesday, the 8th of March 2016. This is Newsroom on SABC News, Channel 404, Jumbo, Africa. And a very warm welcome as we broadcast live from Auckland Park Studios in Johannesburg, South Africa, to the rest of the African continent. I'm Elvis Preston. I'll be with you until 12 o'clock, and you have to stay with us here on Channel 404. We also have a question for you today, a very important one. It's Women's Day today. So, are women doing enough to empower themselves? Well, you can let us know what's on your mind on the Twitter handle at SABC Newsroom, as well as on the Facebook if you like us there. But first, let's take a look at your headlines. President Jacob Zuma begins his two-day state visit to West Africa's economic powerhouse, Nigeria. Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan is on an international roadshow in an effort to revive the South African economy. And we have a special exclusive interview with the head of the UN Women, Dr. Phumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka, since today is International Women's Day. Now, those are all your headlines, but before we go any further, let's find out from Kendall Makhamate what's happening on the sports front. A very good morning to you.
Elvis, a good morning to you. It's a bombshell. We wake up with a bombshell about Maria Sharapova, former world #1. But I get ahead of myself, Elvis. Let me greet our viewers as well. Good morning to you. This is what we've got coming up in the sports today.
I made a huge mistake, and I've let my fans down. I've let the sport down.
Twitter reacts to Sharapova's shock admission that she used a banned substance.
We'll have a clean tournament.
And the ICC reveals that it has acted to avert potential spot fixing and is investigating a Hong Kong syndicate. All this while in the UEFA Champions League, Roma with a mountain to climb as they travel to the Bernabeu with a 2-goal deficit. I'll also have you know I'll be chatting to a trail runner later on, so our viewers better make sure that they stick around. Back to you, Elvis.
They have to stay on that trail, Kendall. Thank you so much. But your top story this hour. President Jacob Zuma arrived in Abuja in Nigeria last night for a two-day state visit. The leaders of the continent's economic powerhouses will meet this morning and are expected to discuss the strengthening of economic and political ties. President Zuma is the first African head of state to visit President Muhammadu Buhari since his inauguration in May last year. On the table are 34 agreements. They include trade, investment, agriculture and energy. Although not on the agenda, they are likely to discuss the 80 billion rand fine imposed on MTN by Nigeria's telecoms regulator. President Zuma will be given the honor of addressing Nigeria's parliament.
Jacob Zuma arriving here in Abuja, really reinforcing the message of cooperation rather than distancing, as has been the narrative with South Africa and Nigeria. But an exciting day, I would presume, for both Nigeria and South Africa in many respects. First, let's look at the political landscape. President Jacob Zuma, will be meeting with President Muhammadu Buhari, really the first solid move in having two heads of government really sort of hash out what has been, unfolding within our midst in terms of, political distancing, as has been talked about, and also the economies and how those two economies can come together. Already off to a really good start was in the meeting with, the Defense Department from South Africa under Zachariah Shoke, meeting with, the Chief of Defense Staff last night and reiterating the effort in building capacity around security, helping to train Nigerian troops in fighting the Islamic extremist group Boko Haram and terror here in Nigeria, amongst other, other issues and other items on the agenda. But fundamentally today, President Jacob Zuma will be joining President Muhammadu Buhari, and later on, President Jacob Zuma is expected to be speaking to, the President of the Senate, Bukola Saraki, and on it will continue, moving on to, closed-door meetings, as well as an open business forum that many are looking forward to, the South African-Nigerian Business Forum, as it's known, and really looking to, openly and be able to express the intentions of the South African government in relation to working with Nigeria.
The Finance Minister, Pravin Gordhan, has arrived in London on the first leg of an international roadshow. The Minister and a team of Treasury officials will interact with investors in a bid to convince them that South Africa can emerge from its economic woes and avoid a downgrade. They'll also visit Boston and New York in the U.S. later this week.
We want to get into junk status. Nor does the corporate sector want to be in junk status, nor do workers want their companies to be in junk status, nor do South African citizens who are going to face higher inflation, higher costs, higher prices for imported commodities or goods want to be in a country where we find ourselves in that position. And that's why we have the sense of urgency from all of us to work together to sell one South African story and to get people to believe in our story.
Now, coming back home, racist remarks on social media and racial tension on university campuses will be debated today when the National Assembly holds a special debate on racism. Now, this follows a call by the President Jacob Zuma during his State of the Nation address for the country to work together to eradicate the scourge of racism. He also announced that this year's Human Rights Day would be dedicated to fighting racism. Today's parliamentary debate will also focus on the sporadic racial clashes at various universities and the effect of these incidents on the wider society. The Independent Electoral Commission, IEC Chief Electoral Officer Masutu Moyepua, says that they will release the final figures of first voters registration weekend today. Now, earlier, the IEC advised those who missed out to register on weekdays until the date of the local government elections was proclaimed. They can alternatively wait until the next registration weekend on April the 9th and 10th. The IEC says fewer than 20 voting stations out of more than 22,000 reported problems. Places in which there were disruptions include Vuwani and Limpopo, where residents are resisting a planned municipal demarcation. The head of UN Women has lauded South Africa's strong legislation to protect and empower women, but lamented its weak implementation. Ahead of International Women's Day, Dr. Phumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka called for countries to shift from a business-as-usual approach so that Goal 5 of the SDGs on gender equality and women's empowerment can be achieved by the 2030 deadline. She also weighed in on the importance of the race for the next Secretary General and the presidency of the United States.
I want the world to know that it is not business as usual, that there's a date, 2030, by which we need to have made significant changes in the lives of women and girls. We're looking for substantive change and we're looking for lasting change. So we have to choose the interventions that we're going to focus on between now and 2030 so that there are significant building blocks for gender equality.
She says Goal 5 of the SDGs on achieving gender equality and women's empowerment by 2030 provides a deadline that everybody, men and women, have a responsibility to meet.
Some 90 governments have answered UN Women's call to step it up for gender equality. What about the other 100 that we have here as UN member states?
The other 100 are quite a large number of countries that are in conflict. It is also a large number of countries that have such complex challenges that unfortunately they do not recognize that gender equality is part of the solution and therefore would have prioritized other issues rather than gender equality. So yes, it's a combination of just states that don't function well and those that think that gender equality is not a top priority for them. So we have to convince them that gender equality is a solution, not an additional problem to them.
She praised Africa as one of the regions leading the way on gender equality, but it was never enough for the activist in Phumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka.
I always say the glass is half filled, in the sense that there is tangible change. We have less maternal deaths, we have less infant deaths, we have more girls at school, we have more girls and women assuming leadership, but not enough. But also more than anything else, we know what works. We have got evidence. We are beginning to collect data, not yet perfect, but enough to point us in a direction. But what we really lack is proper implementation of the good legislation that we have passed. Because one thing that has happened, especially in the last 20 years, is that countries passed very good legislation addressing equality, addressing violence against women, all of it as a result of the lobbying and the hard work of women. But the implementation remains patchy, and the funding and the investment that is required for the implementation to be effective also is worrisome. So I would like that we focus on better implementation, zero tolerance for underperformance, and better investment in initiatives that support women.
We have two very interesting developments in 2016 in this part of the world. The search for the next Secretary General, whom many feel should be a woman. And of course we have the very real possibility of seeing a woman elected to the United States presidency. What would it mean and what would it say to the world if women were elected to both these positions?
Game changer. To have a woman as a Secretary General of the UN would mean that we are serious about leaving no one behind, because there has never been a women Secretary General, not because there aren't good women who would qualify for that job, who would do a good job. So by affirming a woman of substance who qualifies for that job, we would send a very strong message for everyone in the world and every institution in the world that tends not to look at women's talent and take it seriously, that it is time now to do so. If you have a woman in the United States of America, again, the same message will be sent. So both ways, this would be exceptionally good news for the world, not just for women and girls, because these changes would empower both men and women.
Some powerful countries have publicly supported the push for the first woman Secretary General, but also emphasized the greater importance of finding the best candidate for the job, suggesting that it may very well not be a woman.
The fact that we have to have an anecdote when we are talking about women, it's always like there's an assumption that it's harder to find a good woman. And the women who will come forward, who will be supported, would have gone through some scrutiny, just like men would, in order for them to be in the slate that is respectable. So I do not have any worries that we would struggle to find a good woman. I am worried about the fact that we may not all be ready for this, and therefore we need to continue to encourage everybody who has to make that decision that this is time. Women are ready, and I know lots of men are ready, and the world needs it.
Your vision of Planet 50-50 by 2030, as you look down the track to 2030, what needs to get out of your way so that you can reach the finish line?
Legislation that still discriminates against women. We still have about 128 countries that have legislation that discriminate against women. So that is one of our focus areas, one of the building blocks to 2030. We need to make sure that we rebuild the women's movement so that we can take full advantage of the universality of this agenda. For instance, when we are fighting violence against women, every country has got that problem. So we need to make sure that we have this united front in every country. When we talk about unequal pay, which is one very concrete development that we need to pay attention to, that is a problem in every country. When we talk about gender parity and the representation of women in leadership-making bodies in every country, this is a problem. So these are the things that should get off our way. And then, of course, we've got some regional specific challenges that are nevertheless very important and concern the whole world, like child marriages. We need that to get out of the way, because these are millions and millions of girls whose lives and future get lost.
What's been the most important thing that you've learned since taking the reins here at UN Women?
The importance of broadening the constituency that fights for gender equality. From where I'm sitting, the constituency is still very small. I use apartheid as an example all the time. Apartheid was not just fought by those who were oppressed. It was forced by those who were on the side of the oppressor, who came from the community of the oppressors. It was fought by the whole world, by sports people, by artists, by private sector, by churches, and so on. We need a movement that is much more stronger than we have today, and it must be in every sphere of life. And people do not have to look at one organization such as the UN Women. They must do what needs to be done wherever they are, understanding the context that they're in and what is the best thing that they can do where they are to bring down patriarchy.
Well, there you have it. That was Dr. Phumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka speaking exclusively to our SABC News show in Bryce Peace in New York. Now, we will be back shortly after this, but Kendall Makumate will be standing by with your sports news, so stay tuned.
And I'm Vabakshini Chetty Miller, SAB Miller, Anheuser-Busch InBev. It's something that I need to learn to say more often.
Will together produce around a third of the world's beer.
It is a mouthful.
Have you ever considered skin bleaching? Nigeria tops the list of African countries with 77% of its women bleaching their skin.
Now I can see that it is not good because it affects my face and some of my body parts.
Thousands of Arab Israelis and Palestinians participated in a big rally.
Flight MH17 was shot down by a Russian-made missile.
How those chips may fall is a prediction best left to the currency of time.
That's Primetime News, Africa Journal, and Your World on SABC News.
Good morning and welcome back. Like I said a little earlier, this morning the tennis world woke up to a bombshell. Russian tennis star Maria Sharapova, the highest paid woman in sports, has confessed that she failed the drug test at the Australian Open due to a substance she says she's been taking for 10 years for health issues. The 28-year-old Sharapova, five-time Grand Slam champion, faces a possible 2 to 4 year ban and will be provisionally suspended from March the 12th. She tested positive for meldonium, which is used to treat diabetes, chest pain and heart attacks, amongst other conditions. It has also been linked to increased athletic performance and endurance. It is not approved in the United States, but is available in Russia, Latvia and other countries in that region. Over the past month, Russian cyclist Edward Vorganov, Russian figure skater Ekaterina Bobrova and Swedish 1500-meter indoor champion Abeba Regawi have all tested positive for meldonium and been banned.
Thank you for being here on such short notice. I wanted to let you know that a few days ago I received a letter from the ITF that I had failed a drug test at the Australian Open. I did fail the test and I take full responsibility for it. I made a huge mistake and I've let my fans down. I've let the sport down that I've been playing since the age of 4 that I love so deeply. I know that with this I face consequences and I don't want to end my career this way, and I really hope that I will be given another chance to play this game. And I know many of you thought that I would be retiring today and announcing my retirement, but if I was ever going to announce my retirement, it would probably not be in a downtown Los Angeles hotel with this fairly ugly carpet. And I will be taking...
And of course, several current and former tennis players took to social media to express support for Sharapova, but three-time Grand Slam champion Jennifer Capriati was less charitable. Here's a look at some of the comments from the tennis world. Starting, of course, with Capriati, who says, "I'm extremely angry and disappointed. I had to lose my career and never opted to cheat no matter what. I had to throw in the towel and suffer." Jennifer Capriati went on to say, "I didn't have the high-priced team of doctors that found a way for me to cheat and get around the system and wait for science to catch up." We then had Martina Navratilova saying, "Hold your horses, everyone, about Maria. I don't have all the facts. I hope it's an honest mistake. Stuff was legal as far as I know till 2015. And then James Blake says, "Wow, classy of Sharapova to hold a press conference for this and admit making a mistake. Definitely agree that she has to be aware, though." And then we have a comment from Brad Gilbert, who says, "Still stunned that nobody on Shah's team checked new list from WADA. Players are responsible, but this is big-time oversight for team as well." All right, now we had comments from the rest of the world that we're hoping to be able to bring to you. And I don't know if they're already ready, but having said that, if they're not ready, we definitely have comments from the World Tennis Association. Now, the World Tennis Association obviously came and made an official statement right after this announcement was made by Serena Williams. Now, it reads as such. Steve Simon says, "I'm very saddened to hear this news about Maria. Maria is a leader, and I have always known her to be a woman of great integrity. And nevertheless, as Maria acknowledged, it's every player's responsibility to know what they put in their body and to know if it's permissible. This matter is now in the hands of the anti-doping program that belongs to tennis and its standard procedures. The WTA will support the decisions reached through this process." And the comments from the rest of the world are as follows. First up, One Punch Man says, "Laugh out loud, Sharapova. Really, I'm excited to see how this plays out. Nike is already out. And Bikram Singh, Nike, you just lost one of your loyal customers. Shame on you for not standing with Maria." Jody Swallow says, "I don't think it's normal for elite athletes to be on lifelong prescription drugs. It may be regular, but it's certainly not normal," according to Jody Swallow. Bongani Bingwa. Well, while we're getting a comment from Bangani Bingwa, we'll leave that one out and see what we can actually carry on with the rest of the story. Because as you know, sportswear company Nike says it's suspending its relationship with Russian tennis star Maria Sharapova after an announcement that she'd failed its drug test at the Australian Open. Nike says it will await the outcome of the investigation after Sharapova was provisionally suspended by the ITF from the 12th of March. Now, with that said, and I think on a more positive note, we've often been told to take a break from work and technology and step outdoors for some fresh air. Well, from cycling for causes, running for points, CrossFit, the warrior race, and now it's trail running. And it seems that being fit and adventurous is the latest trend, a healthy trend to have, you know. And what a better way to get fit than be in a natural environment such as a nature reserve. Joining us in the studio is the owner of My Road Less Traveled, Nina Durieux, to tell us more about the sport. Nina, thank you so much for coming to Newsroom.
Thank you.
Nina, one of the things that I think our viewers would like to know is how it is that trail running came to be such a positive thing for people to do.
I think trail running is becoming positive for people to do because everyone is more environmentally aware of things. They want to have a break from the city life. You know, our jobs are always so hectic. And so within a short distance from Gauteng, you have these beautiful trails. And I think that's why it's becoming more popular. More popular, yeah.
And you've been running for some time, I suppose?
Yes.
How long have you been running?
I've been running for 15 years. Wow. 7 of those have been on trail. I started trail running when I came into the country. And then it was only a few companies that were doing trail running. And now it's a sport that is growing by the thousands. So
as a runner, were you running more road? Were you running track? Were you running for fitness? Were you competing initially?
I was running road and cross country and track. I was competing on cross country and I was quite competitive on road. But then I saw this thing called trail running and I said to my dad, come, let's go have a look. And I went and it was the hardest thing I'd ever done. So I said to him, Dad, it took me double the time that it would take me on a road. And he said, are you going to go back? I said, yes, next week.
Oh, fantastic.
So it was amazing. And the muscular movement that you use in trail running is completely different to just the road. Because you're hopping over rocks, you're winding through forests, and you're climbing up mountains. So I think that's why it's also become very popular. And
yeah. I'd like to check with you, I mean, because it seems as if, like you just said, it seems like it's a very different impact that it's got on a person's body. And
yes.
Initially it was, started off, as most sports seem to do, started off being very popular with the men, right?
Yes.
And then later on, women caught up with it, like yourself. You started
For
7
sure.
years ago. This is before it became really popular. So
Yes.
you're one of the groundbreakers in this sport. Isn't it difficult on your body as a woman to be taking on this sport? You just said, like, different muscular impact and so on and so forth?
I find it better on your body as a woman than something like a road run because, as I said, you're using the different muscles. So the impact is not just the same muscles all the time. And again, you're out and you're enjoying nature, so it gives you a bit of a relaxed, chilled vibe, you know,
Right.
whereas
Now,
the road
you're in the process of preparing for something on the Nugwaja Trail, I believe.
Yes, so I own a company called My Road Less Traveled, which hosts trail running events. And I've got a rabbit series called, and the first one is Arnold Chats Nugwaja, which is, there's a 20K and a 10K and a 5K. The 5K opens up the field to the novice runners, whereas the 20K is more for those that have been trail running for a while. It's very technical, it's up on the mountains. So that's at Nugwaja, the first of the series, is at Rustic Hiking Trail out in Hekpoort. And the views are absolutely phenomenal from there.
So tell me, in terms of trail running itself as a sport, as a code of sport, as a code of endurance running,
Yes.
what kind of sponsorships do you get, or what kind of involvement from the corporate world do you get? Can somebody make it a career, for example, being a trail runner, or is it more on the hobby side?
I think for a lot of people it is more on the hobby side. Companies are now starting to recognize how important trail running is. The IAF has now recognized it as an Olympic sport. So, but sponsorship is still difficult because in the country it's still relatively new. But yes, corporates are getting more involved. For instance, on our side we've got Arnold Chats, we've got Land Rover that sponsors our stage race, we've got Mark Whiteness that sponsors our race 3. And then we've also got Tom Tom and Rockets brands that come in. A lot of the other top athletes are sponsored by things like Salomon.
And these are all big brands.
Yeah, all big brands.
In the hiking and outdoors world.
Yeah.
And now there's a 2-day race that you were talking about just now. What are the biggest challenges that a runner or an athlete has to experience going on a 2-day race out in the bush? I mean, what a picturesque place to be actually doing what you do.
Challenges, they've got to have things like hydration. It's all self-sufficient. There's no water point you can see. There's nowhere we can get a water point up there. So I think with that, and they've got to have a bit of endurance, which is why we have done a short stage race as well, not just the 30 and the 30. We've done a 10 and a 10 to open the market to those that are interested in stage racing but have never done it before. But stage racing, yes, it takes a toll on your body because you're running for 2 consecutive days, and you are running up on these mountains and in the bushes. But I think most people would be able to do it.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, fantastic. Well, look, you've got when's your next race? Is it this one, this run like a rabbit, or the Nogwaja Trail?
It's Nogwaja Trail, yeah.
Okay. And when does it happen?
That is on the 10th of April.
Fantastic. I think it's going to be quite interesting. I think I might be joining you for one of these next year sometime. Get myself a special pair of shoes and start doing the shorter runs.
Yes.
All right. Now, Nina, thank you so much for coming through.
Thank you.
All right, Nina Durio, she's the owner of Run Like the Rabbit and also the organizer of the Nogwaja Trail, which is on the 10th of April. Now, join us after this short break. We'll be back with more news.
SABC News. We report, contextualize and present news and current affairs honestly, fairly and fully. We consider it a duty to provide consistent, relevant, useful and top-quality information and analysis. Our mission is to provide credible, accurate and interesting news programming, bringing news into everyone's homes in everyone's languages. Thank you, South Africa, for relying on SABC News for quality news output and for making us your #1 source of information. SABC News, Africa's news leader.
A very good afternoon. You're watching the Midday Report.
Lunchtime news amplified.
But for now, this is what they call home. Their hope to shift to a higher ground seems to be against the tide.
Midday Report provides you with more than just news stories.
I just want Port Elizabeth to know that they own a world-class theatre.
Good afternoon. You're with the news at 1 in the headlines.
Very good afternoon to you. This is News Live. I'm Natasha Thorpe. Let's take a quick look at what's coming up in your headlines.
Good afternoon and welcome to A View from the House.
For all things news, tune in to Midday Report weekdays at 12 noon only on the SABC News channel.
Hello again, you're still at Newsroom here on SABC News. My name, of course, is Ibn Jansen. Now, President Jacob Zuma arrived in Abuja, Nigeria last night for a 2-day state visit and is expected to strengthen economic and political ties as well as taking a look at new business opportunities there. Meanwhile, South Sudan has taken a leap forward, moving forward in its relations with the East African community following the Heads of State Summit that took place there last week. Now, I'm joined by our African political analyst, Israel Mkhize. He's in Durban. A very good morning to you, Israel. Thanks for joining us once again.
Good morning, Ibn, and the listeners. Thank you for having me.
Israel, the President Jacob Zuma, is the first African head of state to visit President Muhammadu Buhari since his inauguration in May of last year. What do you think is the most important points on the agenda during this visit?
Well, I think the most important things on the agenda is the question of security and also the question of the economy. As you remember that one of the resolutions of the African Union is the question of taking advantage of the population dynamics in Africa, where we develop regional integration towards more the question of industrialization of the regions and creating internal and intra-African trade markets and relations. So if you've got Nigeria, that's got the population dynamics as it does, and you have South Africa with its own population dynamic as it does, you can never have a situation where there is tension between these two supergiants. And we've seen the social issues like and also religious issues that have happened between the two countries when there was that issue with the priest from Nigeria and the people who perished from South Africa, and the late interaction, your crisis management between the two countries. So I'm sure those things will come up, particularly on the point of security.
Now, so relations between the countries have not been the greatest if you read the mainstream media in recent times. Why do you think this has been the case in the recent past, and why then is this visit so significant, specifically for South Africa?
Well, I think the most important thing is that Nigeria had its own internal dynamics that would have forced it as a nation to really focus on its internal and domestic issues, having had to experience a president who was coming outside of the ruling elite as an opposition to win the election, having the North being embattled in terrorist issues, and having to come into agreements with their neighboring countries such as Mali and so on. So I think they had their own internal issues, and geopolitics tells us that there will obviously be that competition between whoever wishes to be the gate, a gate to the market, particularly for the foreign direct investor. I mean, Nigeria gives you a population dynamic that it could sell within itself and strengthen and show growth. But again, another important point is that when they rebased their GDP, when they calculated some of the industries which were outside the mainstream of their GDP, and also on the question of how they've related with some of the South African companies like your MTN, as we know, and the MultiChoice. Those relations has been strained, I mean, with the fining of MTN and with the reception of the MultiChoice company. So you'd want the head of state from South Africa to go down to Nigeria and say, we know we've got your own internal political dynamics, but we are doing business with you. How is this going to affect the business that we have on our own domestic market?
Israel, let's quickly shift our focus to what happened in the last week or so. Of course, we've had the East African Community Heads of State Summit took place on the 2nd of this month. What do you think is significant that we should be on the lookout for that came out of there, especially with regards to South Sudan?
Well, we know that South Sudan has an economic advantage of oil, and as I said, that the regional integration is also get to more of industrialization. They've got a population dynamic of 155 million, a GDP of over 134 billion US dollars. So I can assure you that all those AEC, East African countries want to take advantage of that, as we saw in Arusha with the adoption of the of South Sudan, say after 5 years. So with the political stabilization, there is a transition into trying to create a more economic stable environment so that each country takes advantage of the economic advantage of the next country.
What do you think the short-term benefits will be for South Sudan of the inclusion into the East African community?
Obviously, these have been this regional integration have been an advantage in that you have more muscle in terms of even solving domestic politics. Like we saw in the case of Lesotho, that there are problems in Lesotho, but the people who solved the problems in Lesotho were people from South Africa. You talk about intra-regional and the export duties. So that's an immediate advantage. Again, to gain a quicker market for oil, it shouldn't be expensive for a country that is over 5 years to actually export their economic advantage, which is oil. And we have seen that even the battles between the president and the deputy president of South Sudan could have been really mitigated, and the crisis of food could have really been mitigated had they took advantage of the spin-off of their economic advantage, which is oil. So I think there is a quick market now that is just cropping up that they are going to take advantage of, and also diplomatic relations.
Israel, thank you for joining us today. That is our African expert, political economist, Israel Mkhize, on Skype from Durban. Now, there are often conflicting reports about the progress of the African continent. Africa is often, seen or viewed as a place of hunger, poverty, disease, and political instability, a sometimes misleading stereotype, while other reports suggest that we are in fact a beautiful land filled with opportunity and natural resource. Well, 2 South African journalists travelled the continent for most of the last decade to discover just how true these conflicting accusations were and to tell us about their journey of discovery. Joining us in studio this morning, award-winning journalists and authors, co-authors that is, of the book. It's called Continental Shift, if you'll just come here for a minute. Continental Shift, it's called, A Journey into Africa's Changing Fortunes. Kevin Bloom and Richard Poplick. This is the book. Very good morning, guys.
Morning,
morning to you.
Nice to have you with us
Thank
this morning. Kevin, if I can start with you, just take us through this journey. It's a long time coming, 9 years working on it. The experience, the motivation. What did you see happen on the African continent in the last decade?
Well, the journey started in a little town called Calais, just across the border from the Namibian town of Rundu. And we were confronted with change that we didn't expect. It was 4 years after the end of the Angolan Civil War. And we were asking ourselves that exact question, what was going on? And the next 9 years were a process of answering that question. And I think we didn't come to a definitive answer. Of course, the continent's too big. You can't slap a bumper sticker on 1 billion plus people.
Yeah.
But we got what for us was a great gift, which was a very nuanced, rich understanding of the continent of Africa.
Richard, economic and financial relations on the continent. In the last 10 years, we've been told in mainstream media that it's boom time on the continent. Did you see the boom? Did you see the development? Did you see the economic growth that people are talking about?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, one of the things that was so astonishing to us, at least at the beginning of our journey, was these towns that were sort of sprouting up out of the dust, if you will. And the question we were asking ourselves is, what does development actually mean? Do these towns connect to roads? Do the roads connect to the capitals? Do the capitals connect to other capitals? And so, what part of the journey was this sort of notion of Africa rising, interrogating that notion. Were the economies of Africa growing? And what we found is that they most certainly were, but not in the way that economists would perhaps have liked to see. There's no sort of straight road of development that runs through the whole continent. That's absurd. There are 54 different countries with different expectations, different needs, different ethnicities, and different outlooks. And while there might be a shared history, there's also so many differences that, again, you just can't slap one notion of economic development across the whole continent.
Which were the areas or which were the parts of the continent that impressed you the most, if one could say that?
Kenya was deeply impressive. Ethiopia, I mean, we've returned there many times, and that's a place we look to for a really intelligent and nuanced political play of playing the West off against the East and maximizing the opportunities that are out there right now for African governments. I think I can speak for both Kevin and myself when I say that Ethiopia was perhaps one of the most deeply impressive places that we saw on the continent.
Yeah, they've got double-digit economic growth there for the last couple of years. It's a really impressive country. I wanted to talk about the elephant in the room, I suppose, on the continent, and that is the involvement of Chinese interest, Indian interest we see now on the continent with Indo-Africa summits. I want to talk about the kind of, call it finance flows, the flow of money that you've seen between Africa and the East, if one can call it that. Do you see reason to be alarmed? Do you see mutual benefits in this relationship?
Well, again, I mean, you have to be very specific about what you're talking about and where the money's flowing into. In Botswana, we were focusing on the involvement of Sino-Hydro, which is the world's biggest construction firm.
Yeah.
And they're involved in 5 major construction projects. The biggest one was a dam out by Selebi Pikwe, which was supposed to deal and is dealing with Botswana's water shortage. The accusation was from the Botswana government that the 5 projects, and most importantly the dam, were just scraping through. We're kind of below par on construction standards. And the Khmer government, after billions of dollars of investment from Sinohydro, asked the Chinese to leave, which was an embarrassment for the Chinese, but I think was a lesson as well in terms of the fact that if you're going to invest this amount of money in a continent and you're going to put the massive sort of media spin on the whole China-Africa thing and the FOCAC forums every 4 years, you're going to have to expect a bit of pushback from Africa, and you can't be sending your junior engineers out all the time, and you're going to have to raise your game. So the major investment has been coming through on infrastructure, which is why we focused on that in Botswana. The new deal flows now are happening more in a commercial space, more in a business space, and you know, we're going to have to see that, how things roll out.
Sort of happening a little bit more organically, if one can call it that.
It's happening organically, but it's also driven by what the Chinese Politburo, the Communist Party Politburo, defines. So it was an infrastructure for resources swap up until last year, and now it's more business-based investment.
Richard, not only heavy economics that you guys touched on, of course, there are other parts of the continent, Nigeria, Nollywood, for instance, and the growth of the entertainment industry, one would say, generally in that country. What are your views?
The Nollywood story was just a fascinating one. So we went to Nigeria, where most people go to look at the sort of doom and gloom in the oil region. And of course, by sheer luck, the Nollywood Oscars, well, at least the African Oscars, were being held right slap bang in the Niger Delta. And so off we went and sort of chased this story. But what we were looking at, we learned very quickly, was one of the very few, if not the only, indigenous African industry. And it's booming. You know, it's really, really interesting, and it sort of crosses this entire spectrum of really, really cheap films and much more ambitious projects. And it's also turning into this sort of Pan-African project as well. A lot of the Nigerian producers would sit there and look at us and say, why don't South Africans come here and make films with us? We've got the cash, you guys have the expertise, let's join forces. And of course that is happening, and it's happening at a far quicker rate now. But what we're looking at was this massive, vibrant, very, very real industry that was built entirely by Africans for Africans. And that's astonishing, and it was wonderful.
Wonderful experience. Now, of course, we're all too familiar with the age-old African war correspondent story, going into the conflict zones, as you do. We all have friends, the Bang Bang Club and so forth. When you guys got into places like South Sudan now, the Central African Republic and so forth, I'm sure you've had a few hair-raising moments. Kev, is there anything that kind of stands out for you?
Yeah, there was a day where, and there's always a day, we broke down sort of behind rebel lines in the Central African Republic. We got 3 flats, and the sun was going down, and we were in a relative amount of danger. The Seleka rebels
this is the famous story out of Libya, how the last, let's call it the big shooting, was a flat tire behind enemy lines.
Exactly, that's it. You know, I mean, it's kind of what you hope but don't hope happens at the same time. And it was remarkable how we got out of there. And we got out of there by walking through our fear into a human connection. If you show fear in that situation, what you're doing is you're disrespecting the people who are outside the car. You've got to get outside the car and you've got to speak to them like human beings. And I think that was one of our major lessons on the book. So that was the story.
Amazing, amazing story. It always comes down to that kind of human level interaction. But Richard, if I look at the continent now, and we're going into this technological age, there's been a lot of advancement, a lot of innovation, and Africa needs innovation because Africa has so many unique challenges. What were some of the technological advancements that you saw that made the biggest impact on the continent?
Well, one of the main themes of the book, if not the main theme, is this idea of roads. We open up with this idea of let us tell you a story from the road. And what we're saying there is that roads are the story in Africa right now. What we're talking about is infrastructure development, which is really what's happened with regard to the Chinese over the past 10 years so massively. And all of the roads that have been built throughout the continent are connecting, and it's all of these sort of infrastructure webs that are starting to happen, which really that's sort of the key to the future of the continent. When it comes to other forms of innovation, and I assume you're speaking of digital innovation, we're still lagging. But I think what's going to happen is when last mile connectivity happens in the last most remote African village, and the lights go on everywhere, that's when this continent really changes.
Well, guys, it's a fantastic book. It's called Continental Shift: A Journey into Africa's Changing Fortunes. It's something that you have to read if you're remotely interested in the African continent. Guys, great book. Thank you for joining us this morning.
It's our pleasure.
Before I let you go, Kevin, what's the next project?
I'm gonna take a bit of a break.
Take a bit of a break. I like that. Yeah. I like that. Thanks for joining us this morning. Co-authors of Continental Shift: A Journey to Africa's Changing Fortunes, Kevin Bloom and Richard Poplick, joining us this morning. Now, of course, we stay on the African continent. I can confirm that the President has arrived in Abuja, Nigeria. It was late last night for a 2-day state visit there. The leaders of the continent's economic powerhouses will meet this morning, and they're expected to discuss the strengthening of economic and political ties. Now, presidential correspondent Mzwandile Mbeche is in Abuja. Zwa, a very good morning to you.
A very good morning to you, Eben, and the viewers.
Zwa, just give us a quick overview. What's the expectation there this morning?
Thank you very much, Eben. As I'm sure you can see behind me here, everything is now ready. The guard of honor is now ready to receive President Jacob Zuma, who will be here in Nigeria on a state visit. You remember, this is a first state of visit to be received by President Buhari since his election in May 2015. So the first president who got that honor to be invited first was President Jacob Zuma. Indeed, underscoring the importance of these two countries, Nigeria and South Africa. You remember, these are the two economic powerhouses on the continent, and I think they want to project that image to the rest of the continent to say they are ready to work together. They are ready to work for the betterment of the people of this continent. And what will happen in the next few minutes, Eben, is that President Jacob Zuma will arrive, as you can see behind, will arrive to be received by President Buhari, and he will then officially begin his state visit. There are ministers that are accompanying the president who are already here, and I can tell you he's also coming with a large business delegation. South Africa has invested a lot in this country. We can mention companies like MTN, companies like MultiChoice, ShopRite. There are so many other companies. In fact, in total is about 120 companies from South Africa that have invested in Nigeria. And you know that Nigeria is an oil-rich country, so we really get a lot of oil from this country. So it's a country with a massive number of people, 180 million people, so which presents huge opportunities. That's when the South African business people and, of course, South African government would be able to tap in those existing opportunities. But as I was saying earlier on, so we're waiting any minute from now at 10 o'clock Nigerian time, and it should be 11 at home. The president, we expect him to arrive here, and then if all goes according to plan, we should be able to give you that live, Eben.
Right now, President Jacob Zuma is the first head of state on an official visit to Nigeria since the inauguration of President Buhari. What's the significance of this? Is this, if one reads it, is this a thawing of relations between countries? Can one see it as that?
Eben, you know that in the past few months, maybe a year or two, the relations between South Africa and Nigeria have been, I would say, have been bumpy. You know the issue of the synagogue collapse in Lagos. It didn't sit well with a lot of South Africans. And you remember some of those, I think early May last year, some of those attacks on foreign nationals. Nigerians here took that very, very badly. As we were speaking to them, they were saying this is very timely for the president because it will show that those purported, perceived tensions, real or perceived, really are done away with, because these two countries cannot afford to go separate ways. I have said earlier, they are two biggest economies on the continent, so you cannot afford to have two economic powerhouses going separate ways, because the continent will simply not pull in the same direction. I think it's very symbolic. It's very important that President Buhari invited President Zuma as his first head of state to come and talk about relations since his election, or rather his inauguration in May last year, 2015.
So, Dile, thank you very much for that update. We'll be back with you at the top of the next hour, as soon as matters get underway there for President Zuma's official state visit to Abuja in Nigeria. Coming to you live from there, that's our presidential correspondent, Mzwandile Mbeje. Of course, our question today, well, are women doing enough to empower themselves? That was the question we asked on this International Women's Day. We've had some responses to it. A little bit later in the show, we'll take a few more, but right now, we're going to go to Phil Hawkins, who's going to give us a weather update.
Yeah, thank you very much. Well, let's get you another weather update, and we're going to start off with some cloud cover here. Now, we're going to see that mostly focused around the central regions of Central Africa and moving down as well towards the western coastal regions. Those extend down towards the central regions of Southern Africa as well. Dense cloud cover forecast here for today. And in terms of your rainfall, we're already seeing that in almost all of these areas. A lot of areas all the way through between Southern Africa and towards Central Africa expecting rainfall already. And we're going to see that intensifying as we move later into today. We're going to see some fairly severe storm systems coming in towards the central parts of Central Africa as well as the western coastline. South Africa also expecting some fairly heavy rainfall in many areas. So speaking of South Africa, let's take a look at what's going on in more detail. Pretoria peaks at 28 degrees and Pietermaritzburg 22. A line of dense storm systems moving from Pietermaritzburg towards Pretoria up towards Gaborone and indeed affecting a large portion of South Africa's eastern regions there. We're going to see rainfall extending all the way through towards Uppington, 31 degree maximum forecast there, with temperatures rising nice and high there in Lusaka, 30 degrees with isolated to scattered showers forecast for today. Now, Nairobi is also expecting rainfall for today, a 28 degree high forecast there, with Kilimanjaro peaking at 34 degrees. No rainfall there in Kilimanjaro, and no rainfall as well in Mogadishu, 32 degree maximums. But we are going to see a fair amount of rainfall extending all the way from Juba, 39 degrees, all the way towards Djibouti at a 29 degree high. This is due to a low pressure system which is drawing in that rainfall as well as those stormy skies and the clouds as well. Dubai peaks at 30 degrees, expecting isolated showers for today. We're expecting that not only in the afternoon, but some portions during the morning as well. Now, in terms of Tehran's weather, we're seeing it warming to about 17 degrees for today under sunny skies. It might just feel a little bit warmer than that as well. Cooler temperatures forecast for Algiers, 13 degrees under partly cloudy to mostly cloudy skies. We're going to see a fair amount of wind in this area as well. But once again, Las Palmas and Rabat really taking it for the wind there. It is going to be a windy day of about 50 kilometers per hour. Bamako's at 40 degrees. Temperatures along the southern coastline of West Africa really getting high despite that dense cloud cover. 30 degrees and 32 degrees for Monrovia and Lagos. Abidjan peaks at 30 degrees as well. So it is going to be a very humid day along that southern coastline. Lagos, of course, expecting about a 60% chance of showers, and that extends towards Yaoundé and Bangui as well. Temperatures rising high despite, again, dense cloud cover and quite a bit of rainfall. Despite that, though, we are going to see some very, very high levels of humidity. Wind speeds, though, not particularly high in the interior. This is where you can contact us with feedback or queries, whether at sabc.co.za or give us a call, 011-714-5077. This is where I leave it for now. Have yourself a great day.
Get all the latest news from the SABC's online news services on our website. Breaking news and in-depth coverage of everything from business, sports to politics and lifestyle. Catch the top news clips and watch live streaming of major news events on the SABC News YouTube channel whenever. Stay connected on the SABC News Facebook page and have your say on news that matters to you. And for the latest headlines and live updates from our reporters, follow us on Twitter. SABC Digital News, anytime, anywhere.
News Today takes an in-depth look on news locally, continentally, and globally. We bring the world to your home. We cover all economy news extensively to keep you informed. We are live to break news as and when they happen across the world. We analyze news using experts in all aspects. Make a date with News Today every Monday to Friday from 3 to 5:30 p.m.
It's 1000 hours, in fact it's 1100 hours Central Africa time on Tuesday the 8th of March. It's the final hour. This is Newsroom on SABC News on Channel 404, Jumbo Africa, and a very warm welcome as we broadcast live from our Auckland Park studios, Johannesburg, South Africa, to the rest of the African continent. I'm Elvis Preston. I'll be with you until 12 o'clock. Also, we're asking you a very important question today. That question relates to International Women's Day today. Are women doing enough to empower themselves? That is the question we pose to you. You can let us know what's on your mind on the Twitter handle at SABC Newsroom, and also like us on the Facebook page. If you like us there, you become part and parcel of the growing family. But right now, let's take a look at your headlines. President Jacob Zuma begins his two-day state visit to the West African economic powerhouse, Nigeria. Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan is on an international roadshow in an effort to revive the South African economy. And we have an exclusive interview with the head of UN Women, Phumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka, since today is International Women's Day. Now, President Jacob Zuma, as you know, is arriving in Nigeria, and we'll take a look at that a little bit later as we contend. But right now, we're going to cross to Parliament just briefly to take a look at what is being debated in Parliament. The new Broadcasting Amendment Bill is being debated. Let's go there live quickly and see. No, it doesn't seem like we're going to go there. Let's go back to Nigeria, and President Zuma is meeting as the first African head of state to visit President Muhammadu Buhari since his inauguration in May last year. On the table are 34 agreements. They include trade, investment, agriculture and energy. Although not on the agenda, they are likely to discuss the 80 billion rand fine imposed on MTN by Nigeria's telecoms regulator. President Zuma will be given the honor of addressing Nigeria's parliament. But before we get to the final news, let's find out from Kendall Makhamate what's happening on the sports front. Very good morning to you.
Elvis, a very good morning to you. A very interesting morning we've had this morning. As you heard, it's a massive bombshell that we had this morning. But like I said earlier, I get ahead of myself. Good morning to you. Let's tell you what's coming up in the sports a little later today.
I made a huge mistake, and I've let my fans down. I've let the sport down.
Twitter reacts to Sharapova's shock admission that she used a banned substance.
I'm very confident that we will have a clean tournament.
The ICC reveals that it has acted to avert potential spot fixing and is investigating a Hong Kong team. And in the UEFA Champions League, Roma with a mountain to climb as they travel to the Bernabeu with a 2-goal deficit. In a nutshell, that's what we've got for you. I'll also be chatting to a Kiona Nedbank Cup Team Search winner, Jared Meyer, a little later on in the bulletin.
Thank you, Kendall. Now, that's all coming up a little bit later. Now, as we discussed earlier, we wanted to take you to Parliament. The Communication Portfolio Committee is currently meeting to discuss the new Broadcasting Act. Let's go live to Parliament and see what is going on. That will be discussed there. We can see the Portfolio Committee is sitting down. You can even see some of the members. As you can see, the members are in the House there. There's our very own Jimmy also in the audience looking at, waiting for the discussion and the debate to start in the Portfolio Committee, which will be discussed today. That is the Parliament's Communications Committee debate on the Broadcasting Amendment Bill. It looks like they are finished, unfortunately. In fact, we've just missed that. Or they're taking a break right now. So we'll come back and see if there is more and get an update on that story. Now, Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan has arrived in London on the first leg of an international roadshow. The Minister and a team of Treasury officials will interact with investors in a bid to convince them that South Africa can emerge from its economic woes and avoid a downgrade. They'll also visit Boston and New York later this week.
I don't think we want to get into junk status. Nor does the corporate sector want to be in junk status, nor do workers want their companies to be in junk status, nor do South African citizens who are going to face higher inflation, higher costs, higher prices for imported commodities or goods want to be in a country where we find ourselves in that position. And that's why we have the sense of urgency from all of us to work together to sell one South African story and to get people to believe in our story.
Racist remarks on social media and racial tension on university campuses will be also debated today when the National Assembly holds a special debate on racism. Now, this follows a call by the President, Jacob Zuma, during his State of the Nation address for the country to work together to eradicate the scourge of racism. He also announced that this year's Human Rights Day would be dedicated to fighting racism. The parliamentary debate today will also focus on the sporadic racial clashes at various universities and the effect of these incidents on the wider society. The Independent Electoral Commission, IEC Chief Electoral Officer Masutu Moyapia says they will release the final figures of the first voters registration weekend today. Earlier, the IEC advised those who missed out to register on weekdays until the date of the local government elections was proclaimed. Those that missed out can alternatively wait until the next registration weekend on April the 9th and 10th, which still need to be confirmed. The IEC says fewer than 20 voting stations out of more than 22,000 reported problems. Places in which there were disruptions include Vuwami in Limpopo, where the residents are resisting a planned municipal demarcation. The head of UN Women has lauded South Africa's strong legislation to protect and empower women, but lamented its weak implementation. Ahead of International Women's Day today, Dr. Phumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka called for countries to shift from a business-as-usual approach so that the Goal 5 of the SDGs on gender equality and women's empowerment can be achieved by the 2030 deadline. She also weighed in on the importance of the race for the next Secretary General and the presidency of the United States.
I want the world to know that it is not business as usual, that there's a date, 2030, by which we need to have made significant changes in the lives of women and girls. We're looking for substantive change and we're looking for lasting change. So we have to choose the interventions that we're going to focus on between now and 2030 so that there are significant building blocks for gender equality.
She says Goal 5 of the SDGs on achieving gender equality and women's empowerment by 2030 provides a deadline that everybody, men and women, have a responsibility to meet.
Some 90 governments have answered UN Women's call to step it up for gender equality. What about the other 100 that we have here as UN member states?
The other 100 are quite a large number of countries that are in conflict. It is also a large number of countries that have such complex challenges that unfortunately they do not recognize that gender equality is part of the solution and therefore would have prioritized other issues rather than gender equality. So yes, it's a combination of just states that don't function well and those that think that gender equality is not a top priority for them. So we have to convince them that gender equality is a solution, not an additional problem to them.
She praised Africa as one of the regions leading the way on gender equality, but it was never enough for the activist in Phumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka.
I always say the glass is half filled, in the sense that there is tangible change. We have less maternal deaths, we have less infant deaths, we have more girls at school, we have more girls and women assuming leadership, but not enough. But also more than anything else, we know what works. We have got evidence, we are beginning to collect data, not yet perfect, but enough to point us in a direction.
UN Women Phumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka. Now, President Jacob Zuma arrived in Abuja in Nigeria last night for a two-day state visit. The leaders of the continent's economic powerhouses will meet this morning and are expected to discuss the strengthening of economic and political ties.
Okay. Nice. All right. All right. All right. Now on to Nigerian national anthem. You've just heard the national anthems of both countries. That was the Nigerian anthem that you've just heard there. Ahead of that, it was Nkosi Sikelel' Africa, South African national anthem. Very shortly, the presidents will be inspecting the Guard of Honor. You'll remember this is a full state visit. You heard the 21-gun salute earlier on. President Buhari draped in a traditional dress there, along with President Jacob Zuma. This is the first state visit of a foreign head of state since President Buhari took over in May last year. We now see the soldiers accompanying President Jacob Zuma as he begins to inspect the Guard of Honor. The military band entertaining in the meantime. Nigeria is quite an important country on the continent. You remember that after rebasing their economy about 2 or 3 years ago, then their economy was revised, and then they the most advanced on the continent, and the Nigerian economy, the biggest, driven largely by oil exports. Showing respect there. The weather is quite beautiful, considering that earlier on it was raining, so they were telling us that these are the first rains since last year. So they were in a dry season, so the rainy season is obviously beginning. It began coincidentally with the visit of President Jacob Zuma.
May I have your permission to carry out the parade, Your Excellency?
Indeed, pomp and ceremony to honor the visiting head of state, President Jacob Zuma, as he walks back to the podium where his counterpart, the Nigerian president, is patiently waiting. He's been observed. President Zuma was inspecting the Guard of Honor. Later on, the ministers of both countries will be introduced to both presidents. President Jacob Zuma brought along with him about 7 ministers: the Minister of Energy, Minister of Trade, Minister of International Relations, Minister of Home Affairs, Minister of Defense. Those are some of the ministers President Jacob Zuma came with here. And you would know there's also a large business delegation that is meeting elsewhere. Taking the salute there. Both presidents are both on the podium now. That was the national anthem of South Africa again, after the president had inspected the Guard of Honor there. Going to pay, show their respects and give an indication of what should happen. These things are done in a military-style precision. They've been given a go-ahead now to go and be introduced to the various ministers. The President Jacob Zuma is being introduced to the ministers of Nigeria right now. And of course, President Buhari being the one telling President Jacob Zuma who this minister is, and later on that will happen again when President Jacob Zuma gets the same opportunity. And then it's the 10 of South Africans now. And this Chief Operation Officer, like Hawonda, the DG there, Dr. Lubisi, Deputy Minister Anda Dlodlo there. And then next is Minister Msebenzi Zwane of Mining, the Minister of State Security, Minister David Mahlobo is being introduced to Minister Buhari, Minister Malusi Kaba, Home Affairs Minister, sharing a light moment there with President Buhari. Minister Tina Juma Peterson, Minister Rob Davis of Trade and Industry, Minister Nosiviwe Mapisangagula, Defense and International Relations, Minister Maite Ngwana Mashabane. The presidents will be then taking leave. They will be walking inside where the official talks will soon begin. As you can see, President Zuma and President Buhari there angling for a nice photo. There's quite a huge media contingent that is there, and then they've just faced the media so they can take an official photo before they walk in, where they will start with the official talks of strengthening the relations. Indeed, this was the moment about pomp and ceremony, and now that is starting to, well, the ministers are also, the media, I think they want a piece of what the ministers want to say. You know, the media would always have that opportunity and grab whoever they can find to make sure that they speak. But what I can say to you is that the official talks now are about to begin. As you have seen, President Jacob Zuma and President Buhari have walked inside, and we know that they will have a face-to-face which will last about 30 minutes, where they will just talk only themselves, and then after that they will then be joined by their various ministers to talk about a range of issues. It's one of those state visits we have said that is very important, especially for the African continent, because these are the countries that are really key in terms of reviving this continent. And as soon as Nigeria overcame its past of military coups, you'd remember the father of this country post of democracy would be President Olusegun Obasanjo, who was really instrumental, together with our former President Thabo Mbeki, in reviving this continent, using these countries as the key countries to say it's about time that Africans can do things for themselves. So right now what's happening is that the ministers will also be going to their places where they will then have an opportunity to talk about various issues. Many meetings have been held before this actual day, but I think they are fine-tuning a few things. As I said earlier on, once the meeting between the presidents, President Buhari and President Zuma is finished, then they'll be joined by the ministers. And then after that, so we'll then have a press briefing where they will communicate the decisions and the outcome of what they would have spoken about. It's back to the studio.
That's our presidential correspondent, the reporter there, Mzwandile Mbecha, live from Abuja in Nigeria. Now we'll take a break and we'll be right back after that.
As stories are broken around the world, SABC makes sure you do not miss out. As the stories unfold throughout the day, News at 8 updates all newsworthy stories worldwide. Globally, we are there. Locally, we leave no story untold. Make a date with News at 8 every Saturday and Sunday on SABC News, Africa's news leader.
Controlesa is actually stirring the pot here.
I'm sure they've been consulted as Controlesa. They did not see a snake. Now that in certain areas there are certain benefits that might possibly be accruing, there is a snake, now we need to reverse the process.
I agree, but it is not above the sovereignty of the people. The very same court you're talking about.
The sovereignty of the people, probably you should explain that to me.
The sovereignty of the people is above everything.
It is not proper the way facts are presented to the public. Are you in contact with Khosekgolo Motshodi?
He was kicked out by the court because he wanted to be amicus curiae.
For your weekly dose of all things legal, join Dumile Mateza every Sunday at 2 p.m. only on SABC News Channel.
I'm Peter Ndoro.
And I'm Rebecca Chetty Miller, SAB Miller, and Hauser-Busch InBev. It's something that I need to learn to say more often.
Will together produce around a third of the world's beer.
It is a mouthful. Have you ever considered skin bleaching?
Nigeria tops the list of African countries with 77% of its women bleaching their skin.
Now I can see that it is not good because it affects my face and some of my body parts.
Thousands of Arab Israelis and Palestinians participated in a big rally.
Flight MH17 was shot down by a Russian-made missile.
How those chips may fall is a prediction best left to the currency of time.
That's Primetime News, Africa Journal, and Your World on SABC News.
SABC News. We report, contextualize and present news and current affairs honestly, fairly and fully. We consider it a duty to provide consistent, relevant, useful and top-quality information and analysis. Our mission is to provide credible, accurate and interesting news programming, bringing news into everyone's homes in everyone's languages. Thank you, South Africa, for relying on SABC News for quality news output and for making us your #1 source of information. SABC News, Africa's news leader.
Welcome back. I'm Kendall Makhamat and I've got your sports on Newsroom. Our top story for this bulletin is on Russian tennis star Maria Sharapova, the highest paid woman in sports, who has confessed that she failed a drug test at the Australian Open due to a substance she says she's been taking for 10 years for health issues. The 28-year-old Sharapova, five-time Grand Slam champion, faces a possible 2 to 4 year ban and will be provisionally suspended from the 12th of March. She tested positive for meldonium, which is used to treat diabetes, chest pain and heart attacks, amongst other conditions. It has also been linked to increased athletic performance and endurance. It is not approved in the United States, but is available in Russia, Latvia and other countries in that region. Over the past month, Russian cyclist Eduard Vorganov, Russian figure skater Ekaterina Bobrova and Swedish 1500-meter indoor champion Abeba Regawi have all tested positive for meldonium and been banned.
Thank you for being here on such short notice. I wanted to let you know that a few days ago I received a letter from the ITF that I had failed a drug test at the Australian Open. I did fail the test and I take full responsibility for it. I made a huge mistake and I've let my fans down. I've let the sport down that I've been playing since the age of 4, that I love so deeply. I know that with this, I face consequences, and I don't want to end my career this way, and I really hope that I will be given another chance to play this game. And I know many of you thought that I would be retiring today and announcing my retirement, but if I was ever going to announce my retirement, it would probably not be in a downtown Los Angeles hotel with this fairly ugly carpet. And I will be taking...
Now, several current and former tennis players took to social media to either express support for Sharapova or not, but three-time Grand Slam champion Jennifer Capriati was less charitable. Here's a look at some of the comments from the tennis world. Jennifer Capriati starting off with, I'm extremely angry and disappointed. I had to lose my career and never opted to cheat no matter what. I had to throw in the towel and suffer. She went on to add that she had more comments to put in, which is there. I didn't have the high-priced team of doctors that found a way for me to cheat and get around the system and wait for science to catch up. Very unhappy there. Martina Navratilova, however, says, hold your horses, everyone. About Maria, I don't have all the facts. I hope it's an honest mistake. Stuff was legal as far as I know till 2015. James Blake says, wow, classy of Maria Sharapova to hold a press conference for this and admit to making a mistake. Definitely agree that she has to be aware, though. And Brad Gilbert reckons still stunned that nobody on Shazza's team checked the new list from WADA. players are responsible, but this is a big-time oversight from the team as well. And this one was like 367 times. Ryan Harrison saying, Maria handled that so well. In my opinion, it was an honest mistake from a great champion. Now, of course, you've got your own opinions on the matter, and you'd like to share with us, you can definitely do that on at SABC Newsroom. Tell us what you think about this matter. Now we shift our attention to the UEFA Champions League, where Italy's AS Roma will be hoping to cause an upset when they travel to Real Madrid in the second leg of Champions League round of 16. Roma lost 2-0 in the first leg at the Stadio Olimpico, but the Italians had chances to score, leaving the impression that the tie might still be open.
The Italian Giants have a daunting task in overturning their 2-goal deficit against Madrid. With nothing to lose, Roma coach Luciano Spalletti has hinted that his side could take a more aggressive approach at the Bernabeu and refuse to give up the fight for the ticket to the next round.
We have to be brave to do what we think we should do. Through that, we may find spaces so Madrid can drive the match as they want. We have to achieve that, then we might overcome them.
We know that tomorrow at least we have to score 2 goals. We will give it our best. We know it won't be easy, but anything can happen in a football match.
Roma boosted their confidence for the task in Madrid with a 4-1 home win over Fiorentina in a key clash for a third place in Serie A on Friday, including 2 goals from their quick winger Mohamed Salah. The game will kick off at 10:15 p.m. Central African time.
Right, now we'll stay with the topic of football. And an interesting one at that, where Jared Meyer has attracted a lot of attention since joining the PSL side Jomo Cosmos. And that literally is because Meyer is one of the few white players currently playing in South Africa's professional football league. Courtesy of the Nedbank Kiona team search, he's managed to revive a career that threatened to be cut short because of a training ground injury. He's with me now. Good morning and welcome to Newsroom.
How's it, Kendall? Nice to be here.
Very good to be talking to you, Jared.
Thanks.
Especially since tonight your team is playing in the Nedbank Kiona search. It must feel kind of weird that we talk today and this is how you came to revive your career.
Yeah, no, that's true. I just wish I could have been playing tonight, but then again, you know, our professional sport is you got to just keep working hard and hopefully your opportunity comes, and when it does, you know, just grab it with both hands.
Oh, why isn't that you're not playing tonight?
Look, I've recently just signed. I know that's not an excuse as well, but I think Jomo has probably worked out his plans for, you know, this year's Nedbank Cup. So, and unfortunately, I wasn't included. But then again, you know, I'm not going to be despondent. I'm just going to keep on working hard, and I believe my opportunity will come.
Yeah, that's what it's about, isn't it? Because it's a highly competitive sport, firstly, and only 11 people that can take to the field at any one time.
Yes, no, that's true. So each and every training session, you need to be sharp so that come the selection, you know, you're in that first 11.
Okay. Not beating around the bush. The main reason why you're here is because you are an anomaly, which is what it should not be. It shouldn't be like that. But you're a young white guy. You play football. Yes, we know a lot of youngsters, younger than you, in primary and high school, white boys, they play soccer. But at some point, they stop playing soccer. All right. How it is that you carried on? What happened?
Look, then again, I think you have to have a real passion for the game, you know. And I believe what I've gone through, it's only made me stronger. So you just need to first push through that initial stage, you know, of coming out of school, getting into maybe a third division. It's a good place to start. There's so many opportunities now where you can play Varsity Cup. That's what I came through, and luckily enough, I was selected by Free State Stars to sign a pre-contract there by Themba Shabalala and Steve Kompela at the time. And you know what, things didn't go well there. I ended up breaking my leg. New coach came in, got fired. And then I went back to my roots, kind of, you know, played Varsity Cup again. And I saw this Nedbank Kiona search as a kind of a last opportunity and thought to myself, let me just give this 110%. And I'm so glad I did, because I wouldn't be sitting where I am today.
So you are still playing soccer, right?
Definitely.
At what level and where are you playing? Where do people catch you?
I've recently been playing for Jomo Cosmos in the Multi-Disky Challenge, but yes, I have got a first-team contract, so hopefully soon in the PSL.
Now, looking forward to that. Now, the thing that you just mentioned now that it's literally about, as a high school player, if you want to carry on playing soccer, you need to just like stick it out and make sure you get that first step coming out of high school, right?
Definitely, definitely. I feel that really prepares you for where I am now. So if it wasn't for that, I'm so glad I stuck it out because, you know, it's not going to be easy. Like you said, being the only white player. But then again, I don't look at it like that. Now I see myself as, you know, when both teams walk out into that field, the ball's round, the rules are the same for everybody. So I just encourage the rest, you know, to stick it out. There's great opportunities now, like the Nedbank on a team search, which I'm so grateful for. So I encourage everyone, no matter the race that you are, to, you know, really take part in this, because you might have got a few bad opportunities or luck throughout your career, and I see this as a, you know, kind of a second chance. So it's really a great initiative.
No, fantastic. Now, your thoughts on the current Nedbank Cup campaign. You've had a look at some of the matches, I suppose, over the weekend. Did any of them stick out for you?
Without a doubt, Chiefs against Pirates. You know, who would have thought that draw would have come in the first round? So I'm glad for, let's say, my friend who plays for Chiefs. So, yeah, the next game is going to be really exciting, and I hope Cosmos can pull the 3 points tonight.
Who's your friend?
Daniel Cardosa.
Ah, right. Okay, cool. I had to ask you that. Now, there was something came out in one British tabloid which said there was some needless skills showed by one of the Orlando Pirates players. What do you make of the way that the township football is played, where there's a lot of gassy flavour, a lot of dribbling off the ball and so on and so forth, which is not necessarily towards getting to goal, but definitely to frustrate the opposition. What do you make of that, and how it's responded to by European media, maybe?
Look, then again, I believe we have to play from our roots, you know, so a bit of skill, you know, it excites the crowd, it rallies your teammates on, and it frustrates the opponents. So, I mean, what more do you want at a game? So I believe, you know, never mind what they say, let's just focus on what we're doing here, and I believe it's working, so let's carry on.
Now, well said, I can tell you that, well said. And tonight, your team, Cosmos, is playing. So what do you think they need to be doing tonight to get that win?
Need to give it 110%, you know, like it's a knockout round, so there's no time for error. So just stick together, regardless of what's going on in the league, you know, keep that in the back of your head and just, you know, play hard tonight, play hard, because with a win now, it will just carry the form into the PSL, and that builds confidence, and confidence gets points.
Absolutely. And talking a little bit about the PSL, have you noticed, look, I know you haven't been with the team for a long time, but have you noticed that like there's a specific way of thinking that Cosmos has got now that they're playing in the PSL?
Definitely. I believe you have to raise your game, and competition is more stiff now because you're playing in the top flight in the country, you know. So each and every training session you need to give 110%. Pray to stay injury-free, and your chance will eventually come. But then again, you know, there's a lot of guys vying for that position as well. So now the position that we're sitting at the bottom of the log isn't, you know,
it's not the best.
No, it's not where we want to be. So I believe just as a team, you know, we need to stick together and just hope for the best.
And your career ambitions, can you give us your career ambitions in about a minute or less?
For now, it's definitely to play in the PSL for Jomo Cosmos. You know, that's my main goal. But then again, just to keep on doing better and to stay in the PSL one day and hopefully move up the ranks, you know. But for now, my goal is just to do as well as possible for Jomo Cosmos.
And the one player that you look up to and say, look, you know, I like that player's style or the way they play their role, because you're a defender, no?
Correct, yeah.
Yeah. Which one player sticks out for you?
There's a few, definitely. Like I said, my mate Daniel Cardosa, I feel, you know, he's also very versatile. He can play right, he can play left, he can play anywhere in the back line, and as well as holding midfield. And I believe that's what I aspire, or I can do as well. So that's definitely one player that I look up to.
Fantastic. I hope to see you in Jomo Cosmos first team colours very soon, and maybe even Bafana shirts, and as we go along and try and get into AFCON, try and get to the World Cup, try and beat everybody along the way.
Definitely. No, look, that's my ambition as well, but you can only take it one step at a time, so that's what I'm busy doing.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Jared Mayer, for coming through to chat to us, and we hope to see more of you playing on the soccer field.
Thanks a lot, Kendall.
Right, there you go. There you have Jared Mayer from the Nedbank on a team search benefactor, and hopefully we'll see him plying his trade in the Premier League. Now, on the eve of the World T20 tournament in India, the chief executive of Cricket's world governing body, David Richardson, has said he was confident that it will be clean of corruption. This is after the ICC had revealed that its anti-corruption investigators had intervened with the Hong Kong cricket team to avert a possible case of corruption, with one player being excluded and the whole squad reminded not to have any dealings with anyone who might manipulate the game.
The governing body announced in January that Hong Kong all-rounder Irfan Ahmed had been suspended and charged with failing to disclose an approach from an individual. Richardson identified the team by confirming a player had been suspended and that the anti-corruption investigations concerned the same team. The Hong Kong squad are now training in Nagpur as they get ready for the opening match of the tournament, which will see them play Zimbabwe today.
I'm very confident that we will have a clean tournament. We're now finding that the corruptors are now focusing on associate members, women's teams, etc., etc. So we've got to make sure that the players from all the teams are very well educated, understand their responsibilities, and will not get involved.
We decided in this particular case that we would intervene immediately. We would bring together the entire squad. We would focus on individuals whom we suspected, but we would remind the entire squad of all their responsibilities. And I'm certain that our action in that particular case did indeed avert, did indeed prevent the intention of just one or two individuals. And we have taken action in relation to those individuals and will be taking further action.
And that's why we leave it with the sport. We now have a look-see at the weather forecast with Philip Hawkins.
Yeah, thank you very much. Well, let's get you another weather update, and we're going to start off with some cloud cover here. Now, we're going to see that mostly focused around the central regions of Central Africa and moving down as well towards the western coastal regions. Those extend down towards the central regions of Southern Africa as well. Dense cloud cover forecast here for today. And in terms of your rainfall, we're already seeing that in almost all of these areas. A lot of areas all the way through between Southern Africa and towards Central Africa expecting rainfall already. And we're going to see that intensifying as we move later into today. We're going to see some fairly severe storm systems coming in towards the central parts of Central Africa as well as the western coastline. South Africa also expecting some fairly heavy rainfall in many areas. So speaking of South Africa, let's take a look at what's going on in more detail. Pretoria peaks at 28 degrees and Pietermaritzburg 22. A line of dense storm systems moving from Pietermaritzburg towards Pretoria up towards Gaborone and indeed affecting a large portion of South Africa's eastern regions there. We're going to see rainfall extending all the way through towards Uppington, 31 degree maximums forecast there, with temperatures rising nice and high there in Lusaka, 30 degrees with isolated to scattered showers forecast for today. Now, Nairobi is also expecting rainfall for today, a 28 degree high forecast there, with Kilimanjaro peaking at 34 degrees. No rainfall there in Kilimanjaro, and no rainfall as well in Mogadishu, 32 degree maximums. But we are going to see a fair amount of rainfall extending all the way from Juba, 39 degrees, all the way towards Djibouti at a 29 degree high. This is due to a low pressure system which is drawing in that rainfall as well as those stormy skies and the clouds as well. Dubai peaks at 30 degrees, expecting isolated showers for today. We're expecting that not only in the afternoon, but some portions during the morning as well. Now, in terms of Tehran's weather, we're seeing it warming to about 17 degrees for today under sunny skies. It might just feel a little bit warmer than that as well. Cooler temperatures forecast for Algiers, 13 degrees under partly cloudy to mostly cloudy skies. We're going to see a fair amount of wind in this area as well. But once again, Las Palmas and Rabat really taking it for the wind there. It is going to be a windy day of about 50 kilometers per hour. Bamako's at 40 degrees. Temperatures along the southern coastline of West Africa really getting high despite that dense cloud cover. 30 degrees and 32 degrees for Monrovia and Lagos. Abidjan peaks at 30 degrees as well. So it is going to be a very humid day along that southern coastline. Lagos, of course, expecting about a 60% chance of showers, and that extends towards Yaoundé and Bangui as well. Temperatures rising high despite, again, dense cloud cover and quite a bit of rainfall. Despite that, though, we are going to see some very, very high levels of humidity. Wind speeds, though, not particularly high in the interior. This is where you can contact us with feedback or queries, whether at sabc.co.za or give us a call, 011-714-5077. This is where I leave it for now. Have yourself a great day.
Wow.
That's your weather forecast, and that's how we come to the end of Newsroom today. Thank you so much for watching. There was a question, and I've seen that we've lost all the comments that relate to Women's Day and how women should empower themselves. But thank you so much for watching. We'll be back same time, same place tomorrow. From myself, Elvis Preston.
And me, Kendall Makamati.
We'll see you then. Ciao for now. Arrivederci.
Legamos.
As stories are broken around the world, SABC makes sure you do not miss out. As the